A good Thursday morning to you. Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler. Out doing something, the international man of mystery. Definitely doing something important, but to be with you all this morning, it's a great honor. We're going to be covering a whole host of things. There's so much news to be talking about on today's show. Did you see they pulled aliens out of Peru and brought them right before Congress in Mexico? Not illegal aliens, actual petrified aliens. We'll be talking about that. The artificial turf issue, Aaron Rodgers and the Achilles heel injury. Is it the result of artificial turf? The NFL players are speaking out against that. And then we've got a whole host of guests. We're going to be talking with the Missouri Attorney General's office on this really important case that the media refuses to cover, but is absolutely critical to the First Amendment, Missouri v. Biden, and what the Biden administration did utilizing social media to go after their political opponents. Absolutely critical First Amendment event. So we'll be hosting Todd Scott from the Attorney General's office later in the 7 o'clock hour. The Chancellor of Colorado Christian University will be joining us in the 8 o'clock hour. And then in the 9 o'clock hour, Joel Rosenberg. You may know that name, prolific author, lives in Israel, runs All Israel News. We'll be talking about this Iran deal that Joe Biden got into. $6 billion hostage payment made to the Iranian regime. And they got political prisoners. It was a total loser deal that America made. We'll be getting into that with Joel Rosenberg live from Israel. He'll be giving us a call. So a whole host of issues today. We're going to start with this aliens because this was amazing. I'm sitting there watching the news yesterday, and lo and behold, they parade into like the Mexican Congress these two aliens that were purportedly to be discovered in caves in Peru. They are petrified. Listen to this headline from the Daily Mail. Alien bodies with 3-fingered hands, unknown DNA, and eggs inside were presented by UFO expert at Mexican Congress with the non-human found in Peru said to be 1,000 years old. Now, what was interesting about this is this comes generally about the exact same day that Kevin McCarthy opens the impeachment proceedings, the impeachment investigation into Joe Biden. Of course, they're going to bring out the aliens. Listen to this article. This is the moment a UFO investigator presented 2 allegedly non-human bodies to a Congress full of astonished officials. Jamie Masson, who has led investigations into alien phenomena for decades, stood with scientists to unveil 2 corpses in what he called a watershed event in front of Mexican Congress on Tuesday. The researchers made the extraordinary claim that the corpse presented in windowed boxes and supposedly discovered in Cusco in Peru were not part of our terrestrial evolution, with 30% of their genetic composition still unknown, according to the Mexican media. Carbon dating by the National Autonomous University of Mexico found the bodies pictured with 3-fingered hands, no teeth, and stereoscopic vision. I don't even know what that means. We're more than 1,000 years old. The bizarre presentation has triggered a frenzy of excitement among conspiracy theorists online, but it has also drawn skepticism. Usually for fossils that have been subjected to analysis, the specimens were coated in what appeared to be sand. But Mousen, who has been associated with debunked alien theories in the past, insisted under oath on Tuesday, these specimens are not part of our terrestrial evolution. These aren't beings that were found after a UFO wreckage. They were found in algae mines and were later fossilized. He later added, whether they are aliens or not, we do not know, but they were intelligent and they lived with us. They should rewrite history. So I got to describe this to you because this is amazing. I'm looking at pictures of them right now. So they kind of look like what aliens in movies look like, right? They got this long elongated head. The skull is kind of elongated. And they've got these tiny, thin little bodies. And I mean, the idea that they found eggs inside of them just adds to the mystery, right? So they're laying in essentially what looks like a coffin, an open coffin. It's kind of nice and padded on the sides of it. And then the lid's removed, and so you can look right into it. And they presented this not at like a convention or a UFO event or anything like this. This was presented in Congress in Mexico. So they trudge these out, and you think that because of the way the camera's angled, that they look like they're human size. And then a human stands next to them, and they look to be very tiny. They're like essentially child size, little alien beings. Now, this guy that has presented these before has been debunked because he had a similar kind of presentation where he apparently found this body and claimed it was an alien, all that stuff. And what they found out after doing research is that it was essentially just a child. In Peru, what they did is they did elongated skull changes. So when you were a little baby, they could adjust your skull and your head would look different as a result. So it was actually just a human baby, but it looked like it. So what I found interesting is Kevin McCarthy starts the impeachment investigations in the House of Representatives into Joe Biden, and it almost feels like on cue, right? Like, all right, here comes a parade of Peruvian alien babies to distract you from the actual investigation into the corruption of the Biden regime. But then what was amazing yesterday, and you gotta love the internet for this, was that everybody went to go point out essentially our Congress and Senate is made up of really old petrified aliens anyways. And so they're morphing onto their faces, everybody there, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, all that stuff, that, we're dealing with some petrified remains in our midst as well. Welcome to U.S. Congress. Welcome to the United States Senate. Essentially a retirement home these days. Not necessarily the most fit, the most engaged, the most brilliant people leading our country. And so you got to love the internet kind of pulling that all together. That was one of the headlines yesterday that I just found absolutely amazing. And it never seems to stun me that they parade this stuff out, especially after investigations into Democrats going out. All right. Did you guys see this? Proposition HH in the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street editorial board coming out here, a ballot measure called Proposition HH disguises a revenue grab as a property tax cut. Thank God for the editorial board coming out against Proposition HH. You've heard George talk about this, Preparation HH for all your property tax burning relief. Here's from the Wall Street Journal. Coloradans enjoy relatively low taxes for a blue state, but their luck may not last. Democrats in Denver are backing a measure that would blow through the state's spending cap under the guise of a bogus property tax cut. The coming tax hazard is known as Proposition HH, a referendum that Coloradans will vote on in November. It proposes two policy changes that work in opposite directions. The first would carry property tax growth modestly by lowering the assessment rate. That would save about $4,600 for an average homeowner through 2032, according to the Common Sense Institute. The kicker is the second part, right? And here's the key thing. They didn't have to add this. They could have easily done property tax relief. But you guys understand this, okay? This is really, really important. They're using Proposition HH as a Trojan horse to get to Tabor. That is the goal, right? And I believe this whole thing is set up. The entire thing is a scheme. They got rid of Gallagher, which then jumped everybody's property taxes up. Everybody had to face with this. And by the way, the institute where I work, the Centennial Institute, came out against the Gallagher repeal back in 2020. So they jack up everyone's property taxes, and then they come to the rescue. It's kind of like the arsonist showing up as the fireman. They're coming to the rescue with Preparation HH, Proposition HH, for all your burning tax relief, property tax relief. And so they're going to sell you this. Oh, if you pass this, we'll help with your property tax problems. But you're going to have to give up your Tabor refund, okay? Wall Street Journal, the kicker is the second part. The same ballot measure would raise the amount the state can spend by about 25% a year, depriving taxpayers of refunds to which they are currently entitled. That change would cost each household about $5,100 over 9 years, swallowing the savings from the property tax cut. The changes could cost taxpayers an estimated net $21 billion through 2040. All that money now going, of course, to the brilliant leaders we have down at the state capitol. There's a lot of stuff into a single referendum, and the confusion is probably intentional, says the Wall Street Journal. The proposal is titled the Property Tax Changes and Revenue Change Measure, with no indication that taxpayers would pay more overall. It's a bait and switch. The Democrat-controlled legislature approved the changes quietly and referred them to the ballot on the last day of the legislative session in May. Now, this gets into the campaign part where all the money is pouring in, right? Why in the world would all these Democrat organizations, all the leftist organizations, all the pro-union, all the pro-teachers organizations be pouring money into an effort to save you money on your property taxes? That's a question you have to ask. The Wall Street Journal asked that. Colorado Democrats have spent years trying to lift the spending cap and the property tax mirage in their latest gambit. Voters placed the limits on tax and spending increases in 1992, and they approved the state's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, known as Tabor. It has blocked progressive lawmakers from blowing out the state budget as they've gained ground in the legislature since 2005. So now they have this scheme. Their Democrat organizations are pouring money in to try to get this passed, definitely not because they want your property tax reduced, but because they know they get a lot more money in the long run as a result of it. That is the total scheme here. You have to understand this. Proposition HH is like the last thing holding us back. Tabor's the last thing holding the entire progressive agenda back in the state of Colorado. And we're naturally a pretty libertarian state. When I say this, socially libertarian state, I was driving in this morning, 5:30 in the morning, someone smoking pot on the way into work this morning. Now, the voters of Colorado have generally said, that's okay if you want to be able to toke up in the morning before you go to work. Probably not the best idea. But the voters have said marijuana consumption, state of Colorado, pretty good. At the same time, they've protected the Second Amendment rights, and they've kept the government very limited when it comes to spending. That's the state of Colorado. It's a very unique state. There's really not another state like this in the country. And so this Proposition HH is going to be the effort to go after Tabor, eventually break that down, and then have unlimited control when it comes to spending at the state capitol. This is all planned. It is all organized. It is all very well funded. And unless Coloradans wake up and don't just read the headline here of the title of the bill, this is going to pass. And so you've got to talk to people about Proposition HH. It is the key ballot measure. Now, there's two on the state ballot. One is Proposition HH. The other one's Proposition II. That one's relatively simple. It allows the state to keep excessive taxes that it collected through tobacco taxes. At Centennial Institute, we're against both of those. We do not like the government having money. We want to starve the beast. We believe in limited government. And so we're going to be against both of those measures. But you've got to understand the implication of Proposition HH. If we get this wrong, the very nature of Colorado is going to change. Friends, Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler on 710 KNUS. We've got an absolutely packed show today. So much to get into. So stick around. We'll be right back after these messages.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain first-hand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Good Thursday morning to you. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. High today, 72. Afternoon rain showers. Friday, cool. Morning rain, 65. Saturday, mostly sunny, 77. Sunday, sunny and warm, 83. Monday, mostly sunny, 82. Tuesday, partly cloudy, 80. Wednesday, few afternoon showers, 81. It'll be a nice day on Sunday. Back with the Broncos. They'll be playing the Commanders, I believe, this Sunday. Billy, did you see that video of Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles tendon? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did.
That was brutal. You could see it through the sock.
Yeah, they tend to snap and then roll up in the back of your calf. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that a couple of times. Yeah, in person. So
you've seen it never happened to you though, did it?
No, but I've seen it happen to people I played with. Yeah.
That was rough. There's a lot being made of the turf issue right now. So some of the players are arguing right now that the result of the injuries that are taking place out there are in part due to the fact that they're playing on turf. This is from CNN. Aaron Rodgers' season-ending injury highlights controversy over artificial turf as playing surface in the NFL. So for New York Jets fans, it was a feeling of sadness, despondency, and familiar memories as a star quarterback injures his Achilles tendon. In the first game of the season, this is the very first drive that Aaron Rodgers hurt. He had a complete tear of his left Achilles. And it carted off, of course, as a result of that. But now NFL players are starting to react to this whole thing. Yep. Congrats, NFL, on how many more players have to be hurt on artificial turf. The first time All-Pro left tackle posted, "You care more about soccer players than us." So what he's referring to is the fact that the Major League Cup, the pro soccer groups, are not playing on turf anymore. They want to play on natural grass because of these injuries that are taking place. We'll get back to this in just a second because we just got a call from Frank McNulty. Frank McNulty's a regent with the University of Colorado, and I wanted to talk with him about prime time and Coach Prime and all that fun stuff. So this is he's breaking into the show, which is very exciting. Mr. Former Speaker of the House of Representatives and now CU Regent Frank McNulty, welcome to the show, brother.
Good morning, Jeff, and go Buffs.
Yeah, so, hey, I wanted to talk with you because I was in Texas earlier this week, and here's what happened. I simply said I was from Colorado, okay? I'm down there hanging out with some folks, total strangers. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Colorado. Coach Prime! Coach Prime, we love Coach Prime. I mean, they were going crazy for Coach Prime. Bro, you have a front seat on what's happening up at the University of Colorado. I saw a video yesterday, students lining up at 4 a.m. to get tickets. Give us insight into what's happening at the University of Colorado, Mr. Regent.
It's absolutely amazing. Coach Prime has taken a program that was lying on the mat, lifted it up, brought it to national prominence even before we played a single football game. But Jeff, I'll tell you what's happening. He has flipped the script on how you come in and how you coach these young men. And everyone on campus who has been around CU football is drawing comparisons to Bill McCartney and what he did with those young men. And it is, yes, it is about bringing in talent. Yes, it is about the playbooks and the schemes. But fundamental to what they're doing is they're letting these young men know that character matters. Everyone knows that Coach Sanders, that his faith is front and center for him. When he came to Boulder, the biggest complaint wasn't the color of his skin. It wasn't the way that he talked. It was the fact that he was very out front with his Christian faith. And so that is, he says, that is the most important part of who he is and what he does. So, yes, they've won 2 football games. And as a Buff, I'm excited. I think it's really awesome that we're going to have Big Noon Kickoff and College Game Day in Boulder for the first time ever. College Game Day, the first time since 1996. Second week in a row for Big Noon Kickoff. Third game in a row for Big Noon Kickoff because they were down at the TCU game in Fort Worth. But Coach Prime has flipped the script. The comparisons to Coach McCartney are dead on accurate, and it's simply because he knows that these young men need more than just fame or playing time. They need to know that they're valued, that their teammates are valued, and that each one of them is in it together. And that's what he's done. And I think that you don't just see that come across in the football field, but you see that come across in the way that this team carries itself. And it is something that is really, really neat to see.
There was that 30 for 30 on Bill McCartney, which was fascinating insight into kind of his leadership philosophy and how he recruited. And you got the sense there that, yeah, he was absolutely, focused on the players. That was important to him. But in recruiting, he went and talked to the moms. And in his conversation with the moms, he said, I'm going to take a role in preparing your sons to become men, right? Like you're only in college, even if you're for the full term, you're redshirted, you're there for 5 years of your life. That's relatively short. Some of these guys will go pro even sooner than that. And so the ability to be around a man of great character that's going to focus not only on their player development, but on their soul development, their character development, their leadership talent, and preparing them to be men. We all know this with regards to sports. That's such a short window of your life. I think the average tenure in the NFL is something like 2 or 3 years. So you'll make all this money up front, and then you've got the rest of your life to live to deal with that. And so the character development is almost more important in the long run. And I think that appeals to the parents that want to send their kids. But I mean, it hasn't been an easy road for Coach Prime, right? The transfer portal, even some other coaches saying, well, some of us don't need to use the transfer portal as much as Coach Prime has. It's a little bit of arrogance in other teams, and he's shown up. Have you had a chance to meet with him? What is your sense getting a chance to be face to face with Coach Prime?
He is as dynamic in person as you see on television. And I will just say that the 9 Regents were to have dinner with Coach Prime after one of our board meetings, but that was the same evening that the tornado struck Highlands Ranch. So I passed on dinner with Coach Prime to come home and be with my family in that time of need. So I get special husband and dad points for that one. But he is just as dynamic in person. And one of my colleagues on the board who, he maybe wasn't quite sure about this whole Coach Prime deal came away from one of his meetings with the coach, an absolute believer in what he's doing and how he's doing it. And the NIL and the portal, that's all part of college football now. And I do think that there will be changes coming on both of those fronts. But the system is as it is for now. And it doesn't, no matter how much you have in NIL, no matter how many kids you can grab out of the portal, it doesn't guarantee you a good football team. And all you need to do is look at Texas A&M. Last year, the boosters down there opened up the pocketbook, told Jimbo Fisher to go out and essentially buy the best team that he could. And he did. But they were terrible. And they're not off to a good start this year. And I think that's because they haven't paid any attention to culture. They haven't paid any attention. They're bringing all these really talented young men, but they're not teaching them how to be young men. They're not teaching them how to play as a team. They're not teaching them how to be an offensive unit or a defensive unit. They're learning the schemes. They're learning the plays, but they're not learning how to play together. And I think everybody's looking at what Deion Sanders was doing in Boulder, saying this is what's going to happen there. But the point that they missed that we all saw because we were living it was that he was instilling that culture. And it's hopefully becoming a winning culture, but more importantly, it was a culture of responsibility, a culture of trust, and a culture that developed a team-wide attitude that other places just haven't prioritized. And I think that it does show when the bus hit the field.
What's the atmosphere like up there with the students?
That's exciting. I mean, I saw the news reports of that line as well, and it is just it's great to see,
right?
Because people there are those on campus who don't think the University of Colorado should have a football program, who don't think they should have an athletic program. I believe that a successful football program, a successful women's basketball, men's basketball program, all the way through our Olympic sports, that is all very important to the university.
Yep.
And football is always front and center because it gets the biggest attention no matter where you are.
Mm-hmm.
So the students are exciting. The atmosphere is truly electric. And with the Rocky Mountain Showdown on Saturday night,
yep,
this is just it's going to be pretty nuts up there, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
You know, what we have found at Colorado Christian University, that's where I run the public policy think tank, is that these student athletes are incredible performers, not only on the field, but in the classroom as well. They're very disciplined people. Yeah, God's given them some talent, but you don't get to collegiate athletics without focus, discipline, and hard work. And that carries through oftentimes into their academics. I think our average GPA of our student athletes at Colorado Christian University is a 3.8. That's better than I did in college. Okay. So these are smart, talented kids. We're building new athletic programs at CCU as well, because it's a good investment. These kids go on to do well in life. They become good alums, and you want them to be part of the experience, and you want students to be able to experience this. This is why you have bigger attendance at college football games than you do NFL. Most people don't know this. You have bigger attendance at college football games than you do at NFL football games, because it's part of being 21, 22 years old and going to college and having fun and going with your buddies to a game and enjoying that weekend. It's all part of the good experience of going to a university. So that's very exciting. This Saturday, 8 p.m., Colorado State University versus the University of Colorado, the good Rocky Mountain Showdown. I have lost bets on this game. Do you want to know why? Because I bet on CU in the past. I bet on CU, and it wasn't for monetary. It was for basically stupid things that we did in college. But I won't get into that. But I have lost bets on this game. I think my bet on CU would be a good bet this weekend, considering CSU is not ranked and CU is. But you never know with these games. It's like with any sporting event. They're not guarantees by any means. Are you feeling good about this weekend's game, Frank?
I am feeling good about the game this weekend. I do think that it's going to be closer than what some people think. It's just one of the things. You now have 2 weeks of game film that Norville can use to help prep for the game. Going into that TCU game, there wasn't a piece of game film that they could use to help prep for that game, and I think that showed. Nebraska had a week's worth of game film, but I think coaching staffs made some really strong adjustments coming out of the locker room at halftime, and that showed. But Norville's he's got 2 weeks of game film that he's going to be able to go in and piece through and set his game plan alongside that. So these showdown, these rivalry games, it's always something special, and I expect to get the best game out of the Rams.
You know, Coach Prime wasn't the first Christian leader in the state of Colorado to wear a cowboy hat. I don't want to say I can take credit for his style, But I noticed that the media doesn't make fun of him though as much as they make fun of me for wearing a cowboy hat. But I also could not, in any point in my life, win a football game. Coach Prime delivers on that. We're talking with the regent, one of the regents of University of Colorado, Frank McNulty, former Speaker of the House. Brother, thanks so much for being on the program today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Happy to do it. Thank you for the invitation, and go Buffs.
Go Buffs. That'll be happening this weekend, as I said, against Colorado State University, Saturday, September 16th at 8 p.m. Friends, we've got a full show coming up at the top of the hour. We're going to have Todd Scott from the Missouri Attorney General's office getting into this lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, on the use by the Biden administration of tactics to silence their opponents in social media, calling Twitter, calling Facebook, sending emails saying we want these accounts blocked, shut down, all that stuff. The Missouri Attorney General is winning this case, putting some pushback on the Biden administration. We're going to cover that at the top of the hour. You're not going to want to miss it. Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler. We'll be right back after these messages. Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler, doing something. Some of the international man of mystery, you know, his background, Army, district attorney. He's doing something to save the world. I think they based Jason Bourne off of George Brauchler. I think that's the actual origin of the story. Friends, it's great to be with you this morning. We just interviewed Frank McNulty, Regent up at the University of Colorado, on the Buffs and the culture up there, and Deion Sanders. I mean, I went to Texas, just told people I was from Colorado, and they go, Deion, prime time. It was, it's exciting, man. It's nice to win something in the state of Colorado, right? And not only that, here you have a guy that we're getting text messages in here, right? Loves the Lord, wears the cross on his chest, isn't ashamed of his faith, and then just to watch the libs in Colorado flip out about it, and they don't know what to do. It is brilliant. Billy, did you do well in school? Were you a good student? I was not. Yeah. You were a good student?
Yeah. I mean, well enough, good enough. Yeah. Yes. In fact, I went to CCU on a soccer scholarship as well. So
it's a good school. Yeah.
Played there for a while. But yeah, I was good school, good student. Yeah. Yeah.
It is. There's an interesting article about just how school is a hostile environment for boys. And they asked this simple question, which I think is a good question to ask. If boys were dramatically outperforming girls in school, policymakers would declare a crisis and urgently seek ways to reduce the disparity. But in fact, girls are dramatically outperforming boys. Why don't boys get the same respect? So the question being asked is, girls are doing so well in school, and we don't seem to even ask the question if school and the way it's designed is good for boys.
Well, I guess define for me outperforming, where and how. I would need more information, because the idea that it is based on either male or female, I find questionable. My guess would be it has a hell of a lot more to do with how people learn. And there are several different learning paths.
Right.
And I would assume that boys probably lean more towards operational learning. And that may be part of it on how we educate. But that's also part of the issue that we have inside of a educational system when we're trying to make it one size fits all. Yeah. And that becomes very difficult. That's why you've seen some people have success at charter schools. Some people have success at Montessori schools. Some people have success at individual private schools. And each one of those has somewhat of a different approach inside of educational system. And the other part that I think we need to take into consideration, and this is kind of on a side note, on the educational system, is when we're talking about the achievement and what happens with the outcomes of the public school system, understand that is one business model that they don't get to control their raw materials. They don't get to control the quality of the kids that show up at the front door of that school. Mm-hmm. They have no, and now private schools can do that. Charter schools can do that. The rank and file public schools have no choice. Your kid shows up regardless of their behavior issues, regardless of their education issues, regardless of the language issues. They are required, and you're required as a school to bring them in. So I think there's also some questions there. But I'd be very curious about, where's the dichotomy? What's the issue between the boys and the girls? Where are they achieving and not achieving? Is it necessarily across the board? Is it certain classes? Is it, math versus science? It depends. So I'd be very curious about it.
I can tell Billy was a good student. I want to dive into these questions even further.
Curious.
Here's from the article. In 2014, an American Psychological Association journal published a study that found girls and women from elementary to graduate school received higher grades than males in every subject. The APA looked at research spanning 30 countries and nearly a century, 1914 to 2011. The study reveals that recent claims of a boys' crisis, with boys lagging behind girls in school achievement, are not accurate, an APA press release asserted, because girls' grades have been consistently higher than boys across several decades, with no significant changes in recent years. So it's kind of like it's always been that way. Girls do better.
That's very interesting, especially the thing that first pops into my mind is then, why do, again, I'm not going to go that direction. That's taking the conversation in a different direction. But there's an interesting question that sits behind there. I would be curious again, the types of classes. I would look at also how they're teaching the boys. And in part, though, boys and girls play, behave, and socialize differently. Anybody that has had both boys and girls and raising them understand the differences based on activity levels of boys and based on activity levels of girls, but also interpersonal relationships and conflict resolution is also very different inside of boys and girls. And it's an interesting conversation, especially does it actually lend credence to the idea of segregating some of our educational system based on sex? Should we go back to having an all-boys school and an all-girls school? Would that actually take away some of the, what I would say, artificial barriers at times for education? Because there is a point in which you reach middle school that the performance or the person that you are projecting yourself to be to the opposite sex becomes more dominant than you actually performing well in the class. That how you are going to be perceived by your peers becomes more important than making sure you get the right grade. And I think that could become a detriment as well. But again, not a science hippie. Haven't done the work. I'd love to have the the white coat and the big paycheck, but no, haven't done it. I'd be curious to see.
There's this common critique that like boys are more restless and they need to be outside and they need to do that stuff. But my response to that, and I think I'm naturally kind of a little ADHD. I mean, there's 6 computer screens in front of me right now, and I love it. The more information that's coming at me and I can jump in between. I enjoy that. But at a certain point as an adult, you are going to have to sit still in meetings you don't necessarily want to be in and pay attention.
Yeah.
It's part of life. And so you can't give in to this, well, boys are naturally squirmy and they're going to want to go outside maybe when they're younger, but you've got to teach discipline that there's going to be moments, a lot of moments, especially as an adult, where you have got to focus and deliver a product, and you can't just be jumping all around and doing all that stuff. You are paid to deliver something, and you got to get used to it.
Yeah,
so
and the idea of getting them used to that type of a surrounding and setting. I'm aware of there's a local diversionary school that doesn't do homework at night, doesn't send the kids home with homework. And some of my kids are talking about, they're like, isn't that great? I'm like, no, it's not, because later on in life, you're going to have to bring work home.
Yep.
There's time that what you're doing is going to exist outside of that office space, and you're not going to have the training. You're not going to have the ability to manage that or understand what the planning looks like because you haven't had to do that. And I would much rather learn that in 5th, 6th grade than I have to learn that at 23, 24, 25.
You would have done well in higher academics. I know you went to college, but you asked good questions, Billy. Friends, Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. When we come back from the Attorney General's office of Missouri, they're suing the Biden administration on utilizing social media to go after opponents and censor them. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back after these messages. 710 KNUS. Jeff Hunt filling in this Thursday morning, September 14th for George Brauchler. Welcome to the show, 710 KNUS. We're going to dive right into it. We have a special guest on the line, Todd Scott, Senior Counsel for the Missouri Attorney General's Office. Major case against the Biden administration, the state of Missouri and the state of Louisiana suing the Biden administration for colluding with social media companies to shut down dissent on everything from political dissent to COVID dissent, all that. And there's been an update on the case. It was appealed by the Biden administration to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit issuing a landmark decision on collusion against free speech. Todd, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hey, Jeff, good morning. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, give us an update. You guys have been fighting the Biden administration for their restrictions on free speech, colluding with these social media companies to shut down what they deem as dissent. So give us an update. How are things going with the case?
That's right. We have been fighting tooth and nail, been at the very forefront of this effort, along with our friends in Louisiana. And on Friday of last week, we got some really good news from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And as your listeners know, that's one level beneath the United States Supreme Court. And the Fifth Circuit said, let me just read a couple of sentences what they said. I don't think I could have said it better. They said, we find that the White House, acting in concert with the Surgeon General's office, likely coerced the platforms, and that's YouTube or that's Facebook and Twitter, likely coerced the platforms to make their moderation decisions by way of intimidating messages and threats of adverse consequences, end quote. Now, nothing is fundamentally more un-American than the White House coordinating with a private entity to coerce them to take down the free speech of millions of Americans. That's exactly what they did, and we are on the trail. We are ferreting out all the details of what went on, and we were really pleased to see that the Fifth Circuit agreed with the evidence we had put before the court.
So let's go back a little bit to the origins of the case. You have people that are being shut down by these social media companies because the Biden administration disagrees with what they're saying. Not because necessarily they were factually inaccurate, although when it comes to free speech, that doesn't really matter. You have the right to be wrong in this country. But the Biden administration doesn't like what's being said, particularly around COVID issues. And so they collude with these social media companies to shut down these accounts. You gather plaintiffs together. So you have individuals, but then also the state has an interest in protecting free speech, the state of Missouri, the state of Louisiana. So you guys sue the Biden administration, and in suing them, you get to do discovery. You look at emails, you get to have meetings and depose government officials on these meetings with social media companies. You even get to speak with the social media companies themselves. And so you do a whole lot of discovery. What do you find in this discovery?
Yeah, that was a really fascinating part of this case. So we filed the case last year, and about this time last year, the judge in the case gave us preliminary discovery. We're allowed to go in and find some documents, about 20,000 pages, and depose certain witnesses, not the least of which was Dr. Anthony Fauci, when we went to the National Institutes of Health and had a sit down for about 7 hours with Dr. Fauci. When we combed through all those documents and we interviewed those individuals, here's the narrative that came through. It's exactly what you said. The federal government, from the White House on down, from the to quote, the highest levels, they pushed on the social media companies to censor certain kinds of speech. You and I, Jeff, were not allowed to talk about certain narratives they deemed to be too controversial, or if we didn't toe the party line. And as I said before, nothing could be more fundamentally un-American. The First Amendment doesn't have a loophole. It doesn't allow whoever's in the White House to determine what citizens get to talk about. But that is exactly what they did. We brought that evidence before the district court, a federal judge, about 3 or 4 months ago. And on the 4th of July, he issued a landmark decision where he agreed with the states of Louisiana and Missouri, and he found that this vast conspiracy was going on and that there was this collusion and this coordination behind the scenes, coercion behind the scenes, and issued a nationwide injunction. The Department of Justice, the federal government, appealed that injunction, and on Friday, the appellate court agreed in large part with us, with the plaintiffs, that yes, coercion was going on and it must end.
Now, their appeal, the Biden administration's appeal, was if we're not allowed to work with these social media companies to be able to shut down accounts, well, then we're going to allow sex traffickers and drug dealers to be able to, kind of operate on these social media platforms at will. And because of your work, you're risking national security issues, those types of things. What was your response to their claims? What did the Fifth Circuit think of their appeal that somehow you're hindering the government from being able to do its job on security issues?
Yeah, the federal government came up with a parade of horribles of all the things they wouldn't be able to do. We think that the injunction was clear on what they weren't able to do, and that was they weren't able to censor free speech. But the appellate court, they rewrote the injunction, and so they made it very plain. And I can read you a sentence. I think any American, including the federal government, can clearly understand this. This would be the White House, the FBI, the CDC shall take no actions to coerce or encourage social media companies to remove social media posts that incorporate free speech. I mean, that is pretty simple. And that yet we believe that within the next handful of days, the court gave them 10 days to appeal to the United States Supreme Court. It is our assumption that the government will appeal that. Now, why that would be, why they think that that the statement I just read you that says you can't coerce social media companies to take down free speech, why they think that would be a problem, I can't tell you. But I believe that the court got it right in this instance.
So you anticipate they're going to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's probably not going to look very good for the Biden administration, at least with the current makeup of the court. And that's not to say that the court is partisan in everything they do, but in this case, do you anticipate that even kind of more liberal judges would side on the side of free speech?
You know, we're optimistic about our chances to take this case to the highest court. There was a 10-day clock that began earlier this week. The government has to make a decision on whether they will appeal. We anticipate that they will. But you and I, Jeff, are probably old enough to remember the day when even liberals agreed on this.
Right.
That First Amendment it applies to everyone. And I may not agree with what you say. I may not believe what you say. But I am happy to have you have the right to say it, and I have the right to say a counter opinion. That used to be what all Americans essentially believe. We've now seen a hardening of the militant left, where only certain narratives are allowed, and I think that's what you saw drifting into the Biden administration, where they didn't want to marshal arguments to combat the right or just Americans even in the middle. They wanted to shut down the debate, and again, that is what is fundamentally unfair, un-American, and clearly violates the First Amendment.
This hasn't gotten a ton of media attention. You would think it would for everything we went through. I mean, goodness, we all lived through the COVID years and watching people propose alternative things like ivermectin, right? And then being shut down as a result of it. It could have been any number of those cases. We all saw it. We all lived through it. You guys have stepped up the plate to fight for the constitutional rights of Americans, and yet not a ton of coverage. I mean, the original decision was on July 4th. This other decision came down just on Friday, and I don't see the media out there celebrating this. You would think that the media, basing its rights in the First Amendment, would be happy to protect the right to free speech. You don't see that out there. Do you get a sense of why this hasn't made the news in the way it should?
Yeah, that's remarkable, isn't it? Because we know that the First Amendment not only applies to speech, it also applies to religious freedom. It also applies to freedom of the press. You would think the press would be, shouting from the rooftops this great decision that allows them the same latitude and freedom that it allows everyday Americans. But I think it goes back to something fundamentally important about this case. If you rewind the clock several years, when social media really became the giant it is today, think back 5-10 years, the mainstream press was very much, surveys will bear this out. It's very much left leaning. I think those currently in the White House and their cohorts, they kind of had that side locked down, the narrative that they were going to get from big media. But what happened was this thing called social media came to the front, and all of a sudden you and me and everybody we know could have 1,000 or 10,000 followers, and we were all our own little media companies, and all of a sudden they couldn't control it. And that's why they had to shut this down. They already more or less owned the mainstream media. Now they had to shut down users like you and me because they just couldn't allow free speech, because they couldn't marshal arguments that were persuasive, and so they had to shut it down. That's why this case was spawned, because we caught them with their hand in the cookie jar, as it were, coordinating and coercing these social media companies to block our posts, or to by some algorithm behind the scenes to limit our posts. You and me, we might not have even known that what we were saying out there in social media was being blocked, that it wasn't being received by our friends and our followers, but that's what was going on. And so I think we caught them, like I say, We caught them doing illegal behavior, and it's time to put a stop to it because this is only going to get worse if we don't put an end to it now.
There's some important nuances in this decision as well as I'm reading through the editorial review by the Wall Street Journal. The Fifth Circuit distinguishes the complaints in Missouri from Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s lawsuit against Senator Elizabeth Warren for asking Amazon to modify its algorithms to make his book harder to find. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected that suit this year. Unlike the facts in this case, Ms. Warren's letter was framed as a request rather than a command, and she lacked regulatory authority over Amazon. The senator's letter also contained no explicit reference to adverse consequences, and there was no indication that Amazon perceived the message as a threat. The nuanced opinion dismisses complaints against Anthony Fauci and others in the National Institute of Health officials because they had merely, quote, promoted the government's scientific and policy views and attempted to discredit opposing ones, quintessential examples of government speech that do not run afoul of the First Amendment. So they're essentially making the argument that, government officials can make requests. That's not the problem here. The problem is that the Biden administration seemed to command and then utilize their authority, their regulatory authority over these social media companies in an effort to restrict speech that they didn't like. And this almost has nothing to do, right, with the company's abilities to limit. We haven't gotten into that issue, right? Whether or not Twitter is a publishing platform or does it have its own rights to be able to limit its accounts. It's the role of the government that's being explored in this issue. Is that a correct analysis?
Yeah, that's right. This case involves what the relationship with the government is to a private company. And as you mentioned in the Warren case and others, and in this case, the court goes through a lengthy analysis. They say, well, what did the relationship look like? Was it just, the government offering an opinion to a social media company or something without coercion? But what they found here was no, it was very intertwined. It was very pervasive. And then the tone, over time, the tone hardened and it became more of the government being in charge, and their behavior got more belligerent and more threatening. I wish we had time this morning to talk about some of the 20,000 pages of documents we found in the profanity-laced emails from the White House to these social media companies. And the tone was that of someone in charge commanding their underling to get something done. And that's what the court took into account. They looked through the evidence we put on, and we had voluminous evidence we put before the court. And they said, this doesn't look like somebody offering just an opinion that maybe you ought to try this, social media companies. This looks like the White House using an implied threat of consequences if you don't get on board. In fact, one of the exchanges during the oral arguments was, if you think back to someone saying, that's a real nice social media company there, be sure a shame if something happened to it. That was kind of the flavor that the court found, if you read the opinion, that the relationship between the White House in particular and the social media companies started to look like.
We're talking with Todd Scott, senior counsel of the Missouri Attorney General's office, on this really important case that's making its way up now, Missouri v. Biden. And you're not going to hear a lot in the media about it because it goes against the narrative of the mainstream media. Wall Street Journal, of course, willing to cover this in an op-ed that came out just on Monday, a rebuke to Biden tech censorship. The Fifth Circuit issues a landmark on collusion against free speech. It's likely going to make its way all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court on the power that the executive branch has as it relates to control and influence over social media in taking down accounts, posts that it deems unacceptable to its own narrative. Todd, thanks so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. It was really great to be with you, and thanks for all you're doing out there in Colorado.
Well, I'm going to give a little bit of an editorial on this now. And Todd, he's involved with the case, and so he's going to be very careful with his language that gets into court cases. And we've hosted Jack Phillips and Lori Smith at Colorado Christian University. I know these cases are very, very important. Everything's watched, but from my perspective, when you look at the power that the left wields once it gets in control to shut down dissent that it disagrees with, it is un-American. That is un-American. That is unacceptable. And I am so grateful to have fighters. You have to have fighters that push back the Missouri Attorney General's office, the Louisiana Attorney General's office, these individual plaintiffs that said this will not happen under our watch. This is not right in America. This is un-American. We will fight it. And when you get to the court system, thank God, it's like the last bastion we have. I've watched this with Jack Phillips for a decade now, that the executive branch, even here in the state of Colorado, wields its power to shut down dissent, and they push back, they fight back, they, thank God, get into the court system where there's at least a little bit of sanity, an ability to remain committed to the founding principles of the Constitution, and they finally win. But it takes years to be able to do this, and eventually they're successful. Thank God for these guys. Watch this case, Missouri v. Biden. It's going to matter to us that are pushing back, part of the peaceful resistance against leftist ideas that are taking over our communities. Watch this case. It's absolutely critical. All right, Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. Text us your thoughts on the 710 KNUS app or give us a call, 303-696-1971. That's 303-696-1971. We're up against a commercial break. We'll be right back. You're listening to 710 KNUS.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
Good Thursday morning to you, September 14th, 7:28. Weather looks pretty good. Little afternoon rain showers, 72 today. Friday, cooler AM rain, 65. Saturday, mostly sunny, 77. Sunday, sunny and warm, 83. Monday, mostly sunny, 82. Tuesday, partly cloudy, 80. And then Wednesday of next week, a few afternoon showers, 81. We still have some 80s. Thank God. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler today. I run a little thing called the Centennial Institute at Colorado Christian University. I'm here in my own personal capacity. CCU is a nonpartisan 501c3 organization. Doesn't get into campaigns, elections, partisan activities, none of that stuff. It's about ideas, but I'm a partisan in my personal capacity. We just hosted Todd Scott from the Missouri Attorney General's office about this lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, going after the collusion of the Biden administration, not even the collusion, the force of the Biden administration to shut down social media accounts it disagreed with. So essentially saying to Twitter, my goodness, that's a nice little social media platform you have there. If you don't shut down the accounts we don't like, well, then something may happen to your social media platform. I mean, they're essentially threatening. And then listen to this, guys. This just happened yesterday, this media memo that went out. So the Republicans launched this impeachment inquiry, right? Which just means we're going to look more deeply into Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, that relationship, the potential influencing, pay for play type of activities that were taking place. No charges yet, but we're looking into it. So the White House sends out this memo to media executives saying that it wants to, quote, ramp up its scrutiny of House Republicans. So it's asking all the big ones, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, all of them, this memo from the White House to media executives asking them, all right, guys, get your marching orders here. Now it's time to ramp up its scrutiny of House Republicans. Go after them. And you saw that. You saw that. Here are people that impeached Donald Trump over, quote, Russian collusion and the perfectly fine call to Ukraine, all of that stuff, right? We're going to ramp up all this. And then all the media got in line and they went after, this is un-American. We've got to impeach Donald Trump over this. And then House Republicans, and for whatever reason, you may say, listen, I don't think it's right to be constantly impeaching either side, all that. We're kind of in this place where it's like the new censure is impeachment. But they've now launched this media and got the media now to go on the other side. We'll go after the House Republicans. Let's bury this impeachment inquiry. This is a waste of America's taxpayer dollars. You know, the name MoveOn.org came from, we've got to move on from the impeachment inquiries of Bill Clinton into the Monica Lewinsky affairs and all that stuff. That's what the name. So that's the left's playbook. This is a waste of time. This is a waste of government resources. And they're sending memos to the mainstream media. Guys, this is why trust in the media is in the tank. Do you guys know it's at like record lows right now? It's at record lows in America because of items like this. Mainstream media taking its marching orders from the White House. By the way, can we get past the pretense? Here's from Jonathan Tooley, George Washington University law professor. This letter removes any pretense of separation between the personal Biden legal team and the White House counsel's office. Speaker McCarthy, just think if the Biden administration is that eager to order independent media organizations to paper over the facts, how much easier would it have been for them to get the signal to the Department of Justice on how to handle the Hunter Biden case? It's all a scam. It's all a scam. It's amazing. By the way, speaking of mainstream media, it's amazing that even the mainstream media at this point has got to deal with Biden's age and just lack of mental capacity. Listen to the media question the White House yesterday.
11th attacks. Falsely claimed he saw the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse. Claimed his grandfather died in the hospital days before his birth. What is going on with the president? Is he just believing things that didn't happen did happen, or is he just randomly making stuff up?
president was deeply touched and honored to be able to spend 9/11 with military members there in Alaska and some families, and was honored by their presence and the chance to make an important set of remarks about why we need to continue to remember that day. And he did that. And he spoke about a visit to Ground Zero, which he did participate in about a week or so after the event, and what that looked and what that smelled and what that felt like. And it had a visceral impact on him, as it did so many other Americans on that terrible day.
What?
And he's focused on making sure that an attack like that never happens again.
I just totally skipped over the question. So the media at this point, my goodness, maybe they'll finally push back the narrative and they won't take these, quote, marching orders from the White House. But media asked about Joe Biden's mental capacity. He's literally saying things that anybody can look up that just aren't true. So he's just totally off his rocker, making these claims. The media asked the White House about it, and the White House, of course, dances around it. But listen to this. This is considered Joe Biden's favorite columnist in the Washington Post. Headline, opinion. This was out yesterday. President Biden should not run again in 2024. Now, what's interesting in this article, it's written by David Ignatius, columnist for the Washington Post. At the beginning, he kind of lauds Joe Biden for all the great things he's done. There's not a lot there, because what he anchors it in, and this is the truth about the media, right? It's very clear in this article. They anchor his great accomplishment in stopping Donald Trump. That's it. They really don't have much more to talk about with regards to Joe Biden's accomplishments. And in their mind, that's okay. Washington Post, David Ignatius. Joe Biden launched his candidacy for president in 2019 with the words, quote, "We are in the battle for the soul of this nation," unquote. He was right. And though it wasn't obvious at first to many Democrats, he was the best person to wage that fight. He was a genial, but also shrewd campaigner for the restoration of what legislators called regular order. Regular order. The power that comes from Washington, D.C. By the way, this, friends, right here, this op-ed is why Oliver Anthony's song, Rich Men North of Richmond, is the #1 song in the world on Pandora, Spotify, Apple iTunes. Why that song by this unknown guy from Virginia went like ultra viral because of this, right? Joe Biden is going to, quote, return regular order, unquote. What is that regular order? Is your life in regular order right now? I know so many people working multiple jobs just to have the same lifestyle they had 2 or 3 years ago. That's the regular order that was supposed to be returned by Joe Biden. Post continues. Since then, Biden has had a remarkable strings of wins. He defeated President Trump in the 2020 election. He led a Democrat rebuff of Trump's acolytes. In 2020 midterms, his Justice Department has systemically prosecuted the January 6, 2021 insurrection that Trump championed. And now, through the special counsel, Jack Smith, the department is bringing Trump himself to justice. Trump. Biden is going after Trump to return, quote, regular order. That is what Biden accomplished. That is why the Washington Post is so supportive of Joe Biden. What I admire most about President Biden is that in a polarized nation, he has governed from the center out, as he promised in his victory speech. With an unexpectedly steady hand, he passed some of the most important domestic legislation in recent decades. Is your life better because of Joe Biden? I don't know anybody's life who's better because of Joe Biden. In foreign policy, he managed a delicate balance of helping Ukraine fight Russia without getting itself into a war. In some, he has been a successful and effective president, totally ignoring the fallout in Afghanistan and the idea that we're now spending billions of dollars in another war will surpass that. Washington Post, again. but I don't think Biden and Vice President Harris should run for re-election. It's painful to say that given my admiration for much of what they have accomplished, but if he and Harris campaign together in 2024, I think Biden risks undoing his greatest achievement. Are you ready for this? Washington Post, Biden's greatest achievement, which was stopping Trump. That's it. That was his greatest achievement. According to the Washington Post, Biden wrote his political testament in his inaugural address. When our days are through, our children and children's children will say for us, they gave their best. They did their duty. They healed a broken land. Mr. President, maybe that is the moment when duty has been served. Goes on to say, we're going to face a lot of problems. The polls are not good for the Biden administration. He's going to be 82 when he starts his second term. According to a recent Associated Press poll, 77% of the public, including 69% of Democrats, think he's too old to be effective for 4 more years. Biden's age just isn't a Fox News trope. It's been the subject of dinner table conversations across America this summer. I think that rings true. I talked to a lot of people that believe that it is time for Joe Biden to move on. But what was fascinating to me was how the left, the mainstream media, the deep state in Washington, D.C. has organized everything around stopping Donald Trump. That is the greatest achievement. And to a lot of people I know, when they see that that's what D.C. is organized against, not improving lives, not making our country better, not getting to more limited government or free markets or any of that stuff, or returning to constitutional principles. We just went through the whole lawsuit about how the Biden administration influences social media companies to go after its political opponents. When their effort is entirely geared towards stopping Donald Trump, that is not where our government should be. That encourages a lot of people to go, Donald Trump is my guy, because it fits in with that rich men north of Richmond narrative, that they want to control every aspect of your life, and there seems to be one guy fighting against it. I was shocked when I looked at the last Republican debate. I don't know if you felt this way. I watched the Republican debate, and then I watched the conversation with Tucker Carlson. It was like 2 different universes. Right? I watched that Republican debate on Fox was like 2012. It was, where do you stand on pro-life issues? How do you feel about the border? What about government spending? How about the war in Ukraine? It was like issue-oriented, and everyone had their little positions. And I've worked on presidential campaigns. It felt like 2012 to me. You watch that interview with Donald Trump on Tucker Carlson, and it was not at all about issues. There was one issue that they were focused in on. And that was an overbearing, corrupt government pushing people down. Donald Trump tapping into that sentiment is the reason why he's winning the Republican primary. That's why, right there. And all of those issues, pro-life, spending, border, they're all going to be secondary, because I think the electorate is focused on that issue. Government corruption, government oppression, government pushing people down, inflation issues, all that. That is why Oliver Anthony's song is number 1. That is why Donald Trump is winning the Republican primary. In 2016, I wrote an article, how the forgotten man saw the rise of Donald Trump. And I was trying to answer the question because I saw this video. And I wasn't a Trump supporter during the primaries. I was trying to figure out why a group of West Virginia coal miners were supporting a Manhattan billionaire with a gold toilet. And it was because Donald Trump tapped into that sentiment of the forgotten man. That is coming back, and it is roaring back in light of the failures of the Biden administration. All right, Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler on 710 KNUS. We're going to continue this conversation. We got a great show coming up. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back after these messages.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at CastleRockCDJR.com. Castle Rock, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy. Why should you buy?
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler, the man of mystery, international man of mystery. Like I said, I think they based Jason Bourne off of George Brauchler somewhere. It's beautiful. Thursday morning, 7:50, September 14th. We've got a great show coming up at the top of the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to get into Dr. Donald Sweeting, who's looking at, he's a chancellor of Colorado Christian University. Like, how did we get to a place in the state of Colorado where you have now 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases that have been decided? So the Jack Phillips, the Lori Smith, and then these Christians that tried to open a coffee shop in downtown Denver where the communists came out and protested that simply because of their own faith beliefs, right? Nothing they did had nothing to do with how they treated anybody, but their own faith beliefs. That's getting protested. And then now you have preschools, Christian preschools, Roman Catholic preschools, Protestant Roman Catholic preschools now suing the governor of Colorado because they won't allow them to participate in the kind of universal preschool effort. So it's only kind of state-based public preschools that can participate. And if you're a Christian, you definitely can't participate. So you have this dynamic going on of like basically unrestricted Christian harassment that takes place in the state of Colorado. He wrote an op-ed on that recently. And then later in the 9 o'clock hour, we've got Joel Rosenberg, the prolific author and editor of All Israel News, is going to be talking about this Iran deal. And then he did an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy on issues that he's not supportive of. Some of the areas he has concerns about Vivek, and you're starting to see that pop up in the news as he's, climbing the polls. And this is what happens in presidential primaries, right? You get a little up there, and then all of a sudden it's whack-a-mole, and the media comes after you and digs up everything. When I worked for Rick Santorum in 2012, that exact same thing happened. No one really cared that much about what Rick believed until he started leading in Iowa, eventually won Iowa. And then all of a sudden I had media calling me going, "Hey, Jeff, could you, we won't attribute it to anybody, but just tell us what you know about Rick. Do you have any secrets you can tell us about Rick?" And of course, I'm like loyal to a fault. That's never going to happen, but that's how the media reacts. And now Vivek's doing well, so he's going to pop up. All right, Dean from Denver, you're on the 710 KNUS show. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. What's up, Dean?
Hey, thank you very much. I'll try to be quick here. In my opinion, we're back to that Time magazine article that came out, where basically they were showing not how votes were stolen physically, but they were showing how basically the election cycle was corrupted, via things we saw, Facebook and other companies manipulating their news feeds, shadow banning and suspension of accounts on the internet, YouTube, deleting comments, removing the dislike button, all that stuff. All that stuff had an effect on the election. And throw in the fact that basically in this country, it's ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, the Associated Press, CNN, and MSNBC versus Fox.
Yep.
How does the right stand a chance?
Well, there's a lot of truth to the collusion around the left, the utilization of their media companies. We saw that. You see that in the Missouri v. Biden case, that if there's something they don't like, they don't sit idly by. And you've got this memo that went from the White House yesterday telling all the media executives, now is the time to ramp up your criticism of House Republicans when it comes to the impeachment inquiry. They work together. It's all the same world view. They work together. And you do have these moments that break through, Dean. And I was filling in for Stephen Tubbs when I first heard, it was within 24 hours of the release of Rich Men North of Richmond by Oliver Anthony, that I said, this song's going to change America. And I remember people on social media being like, this is not going to change America. It's been the number one song. It's still the number one song on Pandora right now. Most liked song. Rich Men North of Richmond. That there's only a certain amount of being pressed down. And look, Dean, trust in the media, the mainstream media, is at record lows not because they disagree with what's being promoted or said, but because they know they're all working together, that it's a sham right? To push down people that disagree with the narrative that's being pushed from the White House. I mean, the fact that the White House is sending memos yesterday to all the mainstream media, now is the time, ramp up your opposition to this impeachment inquiry. And then this lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, where they're pressuring, saying, you need to take down these accounts that we disagree with. I think most people are waking up to that. But Dean, we're up against the commercial break here. Thanks for the call. Hey, guys, this is why KNUS is so important. This is why I love KNUS. Because you get the pushback right here. The great free speech resistance to ideas takes place with 710 KNUS. All right, Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. We got another few great hours coming up, so stick around. We'll be right back after these messages. Beautiful September 14th, Thursday morning. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler, 8:05. You're listening to 710 KNUS, the great resistance, the peaceful resistance. I feel like I have to say that. But of course, the peaceful resistance against the leftist takeover of the state of Colorado begins right here on 710 KNUS. Article out, Channel 4. Governor Jared Polis orders state to phase out, quote, loud, smelly, and noisy yard tools. Okay, I'm going to get into this because I'm dealing with this libertarian notion that somehow Jared Polis is the great libertarian governor in America. He did this interview with John Stossel recently. I don't know if you saw it. And they fawn over the guy. These national libertarians, anybody who lives in Colorado knows, they know that Jared Polis is not a libertarian. Yet, for some reason, even Fox picks up on this. Dana Perino, Jared Polis is this great libertarian governor. All right, so Channel 4. Governor Jared Polis issued an executive order, because that's what libertarians do, aimed at making Colorado greener, cleaner, and quieter. It requires the state and state contractors to phase out all gas-powered lawn and garden tools over the next 2 years and replace them with electric equipment. The order covers everything from mowers and blowers to dethatchers and weed whackers. We're going to lead the way on this. We're going to move away from the loud, smelly, noisy equipment with diesel fuel to the lower cost, cleaner, quieter electric leaf blowers and lawnmowers. Is anyone's lawnmower actually run by diesel? I don't know anyone's lawnmower that runs off of diesel. I know tractors run. My tractor runs off of diesel. But lawnmowers? Off of diesel? They all run off of a gas oil mixture. A total of 75% of the lawn equipment used to keep up the grounds at the state capitol is already electric. Congratulations. Democrats down at the state capitol, 75% of your lawn equipment. By the way, I'm really glad they're jumping on this after letting the Capitol sit vandalized for 6 weeks back in 2020. My goodness. All right. But the transition isn't as far along at other state buildings in Colorado's 43 state parks. So the governor decided to step on the gas, considering the small tools create considerable pollution. The EPA says one gas mower emits the same pollution per hour as 11 cars. The governor's executive order not only addresses lawn equipment, but the lawn itself. It calls for a shift to water-wise landscaping, as well as water-efficient plumbing and appliances as replacements are needed. The state is going to be asking others to do this. And we do want private partners to do this. We want people to do this in their homes. The state needs to lead the way. We need to put our own skin in the game. The governor said, while the changes may cost the state more, on the front end, they'll save the state money in gas and water in the long run. The executive order comes as the Colorado Air Quality Control Commission considers banning both government and commercial entities from using gas-powered lawn equipment during the summer months and businesses in metro area counties with high ozone from selling them altogether. The state is offering a tax credit right now to anyone who switches from gas to electric lawn equipment. The great march towards total government control continues. What drives me just crazy about all this is this notion that Jared Polis, because he wants to get rid of the state income tax, is fine with legalized marijuana, doctor-assisted suicide. You can kill your child in the state of Colorado, preborn child if you like, not a post-birth child, but preborn child. And they somehow some libertarian governor in that Colorado is this great libertarian state. Yes, it is a socially libertarian state and is like the lead social conservative in the state of Colorado. I oftentimes find myself totally on the opposite ends of some of the social issues in the state of Colorado. Evangelical Christian, believe in traditional marriage, sanctity of life, all that stuff. So I understand this kind of social libertarian nature of Colorado. We have doctor-assisted suicide, sports gambling, all that stuff. But Jared Polis is not just going to be a governor that finishes his term in a few years and just kind of rides off into the sunset. This is a guy that wants to be the president of the United States, and he's positioning himself to be a presidential candidate. Now, I don't know if Joe Biden's going to make it through this next election or if they're going to ask for a primary. There's only a few months left for that to be figured out. And Gavin Newsom, Jared Polis are going to be kind of two of the leading contenders in the Democrat primary for president. We know that that is coming. But it is up to us as Coloradans to make sure nationally everybody knows there's not a huge difference between Jared Polis and Gavin Newsom. That the state of Colorado, that what we're dealing with is not much different than the state of California. And prime example, Jared Polis wants to order the state to phase out loud, smelly, and noisy, apparently diesel yard tools. Now, does he have the right to stop this from being used on state grounds? Yes, he's the chief executive in the state. But if you think, guys, that they are going to stop here, you're sadly mistaken. This is a march. This is a crazy march to a lot of control in your life. And this is where I ask those social libertarians out there, is this the type of government you want? Is this the type of control that you're okay with in the state of Colorado? Yeah, you can smoke your pot. Yeah, you can take mushrooms. Yeah, you can kill yourself if you want with doctor-assisted suicide. But at the same time, you're going to allow people to tell you what yard tools you can use? There's not a lot of consistency there. And Jared Polis is definitely not a libertarian governor by any stretch. If you only define libertarianism as the right to use the drugs you want to use, then yeah, maybe he can fall under that. But government control over your lives, Proposition HH, taking away your Tabor refund, all that, you're going to allow that to happen because you're happy about the libertarian nature? I mean, think of this. Think about where the state's going with the leftists in control. They claim personal freedom. If you go watch this John Stossel interview with Jared Polis, he talks about how Democrats are all about personal freedom. We all love personal freedom. It's the Republicans that want to control you. They want to control your body. They want to control who you can marry, all that stuff. That's his claim. All right, the dude is banning certain types of lawn equipment, and then Denver Post headline, Denver moves to permanently close some streets to traffic. Who wants to go downtown right now with leftist control? This is supposed to be the great freedom state, right? The great libertarian state. How is that working out in the state of Denver, city of Denver, state of Colorado? The mental state of Denver is seriously broken, right? You got the homelessness, you got the drug use that's happening down there. And now they want to control which streets you can walk on or drive on and have control over there. Denver is taking steps to permanently close 3 streets that became pedestrian only during the pandemic. Part of a broader effort, this is the key, broader effort to make the city more friendly to those walking and biking, but has decided to reopen a segment of 7th Avenue. 2 stretches along Larimer Street and one on Glenarm Place in the heart of downtown have entered a city process to stay closed for another 5 years. After 2028, those closures, backed by business owners and economic development groups, would become permanent if nobody objects. Did you guys see that op-ed? It was in the Sun recently. This woman had run for U.S. Senate in Colorado. She ran the Democrat primary. She didn't win. But she said it was a good thing. It was a good thing that gas prices are going higher so that we'll finally move to alternative energy. Guys, this isn't a freedom move. This is crazy draconian. Controlling what type of lawn equipment you can use, controlling what streets are going to be open to cars and whatnot streets are going to be open, and then celebrating when gas prices go up. And my question on all of that, through that whole process, that op-ed that was written in the Sun about celebrating gas prices going up from the left, is this mentality that exists that almost like no one with families is out there. Because if you're a family, right, and you're driving, you're not taking the bus, You're not riding your bike. You're not walking to go pick up your kids from school and then to take them to sports activities and then to pick up groceries after the fact. If you took the bus to do all of that, you wouldn't be getting home till midnight, 1 a.m. each day. All of us that live lives in the suburbs rely on our cars for everything, right? For everything. We joke we're like the little taxi cab drivers for our kids and all the activities that they're doing. And it gets into a larger worldview issue with the left, where it's almost like families don't exist in that, right? All of these bike lanes. I mean, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you ride with your kids to school. You live downtown, you get on your bike in February and ride with your kids to school. But that's not how most of us live. All right, we have a long commute to our kids' school. If there's not even a bus stop out where we live in Elizabeth, Colorado, we have to rely on cars. And celebrating higher gas prices as a result of this leftist climate agenda, this freak out over global warming. So we're going to punish families that drive their kids places. That's the punishment. You have to go get groceries for your family. The left sits there and celebrates that punishment. That is wild. That is not a freedom state. That is not a libertarian state. That is an agenda-driven, leftist, Marxist state. That is who's in control. That is the power. That is what they celebrate. And congratulations. You now have people telling you what lawn tools to be used and where you should drive. That's the libertarian state we live in. My goodness, I'm all worked up this morning. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. All right, we got Jay on the line. What's up, Jay?
Oh, I'm succinct with what you're speaking about, but I wanted to chat before I mention the taxes. We have buildings down on Broadway, 2nd Broadway, 4th and Broadway. You know, that used to be a business district there. And on the left side of Broadway, which is the east side, they had put a bike lane in and actually taken all of the parking, the street side parking, and moved it out into the street, into a second lane. So they've actually taken 2 lanes out of Broadway. On the right side of Broadway, there's a bus lane. So basically you're cut to 2 lanes, and all those poor vendors down there that are dealing with what they're dealing with, which is a lot of people sleeping in their front entrances, they have to park their cars on in the street side of a bicycle lane that is completely cordoned off. And Broadway's, you know, obviously the big exit from downtown if you live in the South Metro area. It's just horrible what they're doing.
It's not a city I want to visit. I'll be honest with you. We just moved the Western Conservative Summit out of Denver. We're going to be up at the Westin in Westminster this year because you can drive and park there. I mean, it's one of the things that we're taking into consideration. I think what they want is Denver to look like some European city. All right, you're going to walk around, and I've been to Amsterdam, proposed to my wife there. We loved European cities. All right. One, you don't have nearly the charm, right? You don't have the old churches to visit. You don't have the old buildings, the history to walk around. You don't have the canals. The beauty isn't there. It's Broadway. It's Broadway. They want you to walk around Broadway with the vape shop there and, you know, the pot shop over there and the liquor shop over there, but we're not going to allow you to park there. So you're going to have to take the light rail down there. By the way, I tried to take light rail. Has anyone taken the light rail to a Rockies game or to a Broncos game? And it's like herding cattle. You're jammed in there. The population density is not nearly where it needs to be able to support light rail. I don't know anyone who's really, and I lived in Washington, D.C. We lived right next to the metro. I rode the metro, and that had all of its own problems, but it was better than the light rail. Light rail isn't even that good. It breaks down a lot of times. Trains don't even show up half the time. But why is this a model? They are so bent on forcing Denver into this. And the voters keep going, I guess this is what we want. We want, you know, but John Caldera was talking about this yesterday on the show where he said that a third, we're like one of the third highest vacancy rates for downtown Denver. Nobody wants to go down there. Nobody from Highlands Ranch, no one from Aurora, no one from Lakewood, no one from Westminster actually looks forward to going downtown. It's kind of something we have to do. And I remember it wasn't this way. I remember in 10, 15 years ago, it was an enjoyable place. You drive down there, you walk around the 16th Street Mall, you enjoy the nice restaurants. It was kind of fun. But the crime on top of the homelessness, on top of these weird bike lanes, on top of, this idea that we're going to control who's going down and shutting down these streets, it doesn't make it an enjoyable experience. That's just my opinion. What do you think, Jay?
Well, I couldn't agree more. Back in '89, they did a rehab of Larimer and 16th Street. They widened the sidewalks and narrowed the roads on Larimer and all the way up to 18th, and then all the way to Broadway, of course, 17th Street, 16th Street Mall. What the big secret is about the mall is that we were a utility company and a developer. You can walk from Larimer all the way to Broadway underneath the 16th Street Mall. So all those homeless people, they just duck and they go underneath, and there's these big parking lots down there. So they never get cold or anything, and then they come out in the daytime and do the horrible things that they do. Like we went down with our daughters for birthday party, and they wanted to go down to the 16th Street Mall. This was several years ago. And we just got mauled when we left there's a nice Italian restaurant down there by the Hard Rock. Just got mauled by these people offering us drugs and just all this garbage. There's no way we're going to go back down to 16th Street Mall and walk anywhere. The other thing about their philosophy is, I just think they're trying to just drag or push the right people out, with the wrong people in. I really do believe this is a firm replacement of decency, honestly. Now, on the antithesis of that, I cannot stand CU, never have, but now I'm a fan. The coach has got faith-based.
Yeah.
He's got his son playing. Everybody gave him the heck of it. Well, I was a ball player at Southern Cal. His son and Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is one of the few guys that played both ways in the NFL. He never left the field, other than special teams. He's got his son playing, but he's also showing the fine people of Boulder that demonic indecency is wrong, and faith will win. And that's a McCartney thing. Remember Bill McCartney, what he did for that team? But let me tell you one other thing about the property tax, because I want to circle back to you and actually.
Jay, I've got to get a commercial break in here. Stick around, will you? Stick around. We're up against a commercial break. Friends, Jay is right that it is a replacement idea, and I will tell you this: you can have one or the other when it comes to the city of Denver. You either have drug users or you will have families. They will not coexist in the same spot. All right. If you have families there, you have to keep the drug users out. If you allow drug users in, families are going to naturally leave. They're not, like Jay said, like most of the listeners, we will not put our families in that types of harm's way. And so the leaders of the city of Denver have made their choice. They have made their choice. It isn't an accident. They have said, we're going to provide housing first. We're going to provide homes for these people. We're going to make them the priority. Fighting crime, creating a safe place for families is not the priority. That is the truth with the city of Denver. All right, Jeff, I'm filling in for George Brauchler on the great 710 KNUS. We'll be right back after these messages.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler, having a great conversation with Billy in the office. Billy was a debater in high school, and how important that is, I think, to young kids developing, to be able to understand critical reason, work through both sides. All right, Jay, we're having a conversation with Jay about the left and their total control over our lives, which just seems to be like something every news story you could talk about these days. But Jay, you want to talk about property taxes? What's up, man?
Yes. I've tried to keep up with some of the antics they put us through with, removing Gallagher, and sort of tricked people to vote for removal of Gallagher. One of the issues I have is, what do we do to countermand this? We have some properties, not only ours, but rentals, and some of the rentals for single family in Arapahoe County, they've raised the taxes by $400,000.
No, I mean, the way you counteract it is you get smarter than they do. And unfortunately, they're smarter than the right is right now. I will say this. I will say the left is more strategic. They are smarter in their long-term planning than we are. And part of it is their natural worldview to embrace government as a form of a change for them, right? For conservatives, government's like way down the list. We prioritize our family. We prioritize our faith communities. We engage there. Like, I think about how my church is doing. Are we bringing in enough people? Do we have a good youth group? How's our pastor doing? We think about all that stuff. And then, of course, we our families, right? Our kids getting a good education. And then are they having good sports experiences? Are we forming well-rounded people? Not to say that the left doesn't think about that, but government is way down the list for us. And for the left, it's one of the key change agents. So I agree with you, Jay, in the sense that Gallagher and Proposition HH were tied together. That is really important for everybody to understand. The repeal of Gallagher, which took place, I believe, in 2020, and now in 2023, the Proposition HH, which they're all linked together. So the repeal of Gallagher is going to force more taxes to come out of residential property. And so the cap was lifted, and everybody, and we saw this in the ballot, I believe, which was in 2020, that this was going to raise taxes. We knew that the repeal of Gallagher was going to raise taxes on individual property owners, residential property owners. So we saw that coming. I think they planned that. So now everybody's going, my property taxes are huge. They're skyrocketing. We need help. And Jared Polis comes along and says, I'm here to help. The legislature comes along. I'm here to help. Proposition HH, Preparation HH, for all of your property tax burning needs. This is going to help you. And they're not showcasing, and this is what the Wall Street Journal got into. They're not showcasing the other side, which is this is going to cost you more out of your Tabor refund as a result. And they didn't need to tie this to your Tabor refund. There's no requirement. This was an add-on. So they're going to provide property tax relief. And by the way, so long as you're not really paying attention, if you read the ballot language too, this isn't clearly evident. This took conservatives looking at this going, wait a second, this doesn't smell right. And then seeing that there is an effort to keep your Tabor refund and now spend that money on education. And by the way, even Colorado Public Radio was saying that this should be called like the Education Tax Relief Fund. This is because that's where the money's actually going. And yet all of this is hidden. And it's all part of this effort to, get more control of your tax dollars. So that's what's coming down the line. And the reason they do this is because they think like this. And they're smarter. And oftentimes I can't even get conservatives to show up to testify down at the state capitol on issues, let alone think strategically about how we're going to utilize money to drive an agenda through the government to achieve our ends. That we just don't think like that. And so I think that's one of the problems, Jay.
So what do we do to stop that and also come up with some way to put Gallagher back in or a form of Gallagher? Because this is just hurting property owners. Properties are owned by property owners, and everyone's rent is going to skyrocket.
That's right. If you're a renter, Proposition HH, you're like the ultimate loser in Proposition HH because you're not going to get any property tax relief, and you're going to lose your Tabor refund or a portion of it. So congratulations. You're the one that's really, and by the way, we pointed this out one time on our show too, that, renters, they're not the property owners, which means that they tend to be in a kind of a different economic class sometimes. They're the ones that are really going to hurt. So the Democrats are hurting those a lot more than they may be necessarily hurting rich property owners in Aspen, for instance. So there's definitely an issue there that hasn't been fleshed out on this Proposition HH. But what do? You create statesmen. Billy and I were talking about Lincoln-Douglas debates. Why don't those happen anymore? So the Lincoln-Douglas debate was a 3-hour debate that took place 7 times in the state of Illinois, all over in different regions. Abraham Lincoln debated the issue of slavery 7 times for 3 hours. All right. That guy knew that issue.
White guy that freed all the black people. Oh, that's right.
Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the Republic. That's right. The Republican Party was founded as an abolitionist party. And if you hear from the left on this, right? Wow, that's not necessarily true. Just go listen to the Lincoln-Douglas debate. Stephen Douglas is going, here you have Abraham Lincoln, and he's organizing all these abolitionists into a party. And by the way, Douglas was arguing about how he didn't believe in civil rights and equal rights and all that stuff. And Lincoln is just, what he called a crazed abolitionist. But what we're electing right now, and I will really get worked up about this because I sit down at the state capitol. It's part of my job to listen to this. We are electing delivery boys and girls for special interest groups. That's all they do. They are not lawmakers. We don't elect people that are principled, right? They're really, really deeply committed to principles. We don't elect those people. We don't elect people that are very knowledgeable on issues. They're not like the Abraham Lincolns where they could argue for 3 hours on the issue of slavery and all that stuff. And, Northwest Territories and whether or not we're going to allow slavery into these additional states. We don't elect people that know issues particularly well. And then we don't elect people that are really deeply committed to their constituents either. I would say maybe there's one guy I know that puts his mantra is about constituents, and that's Mike Kaufman. Mike Kaufman lives for his constituents. He'll go to everything out there. He goes to, the Ethiopian New Year celebration, and then he goes to the Chinese celebration, and then he goes to this church and that synagogue. He loves people. And so he puts his constituents first. I think that's a guy that I would say is in office because he supports his constituents. So out of those 3 things, principled, issue-oriented, constituent-oriented, we do not elect those people. Instead, we elect people that deliver for special interest groups. That's their skill set. Okay. So here's what happens at the state capitol. They take a big lot of money from groups like Planned Parenthood, ACLU to get elected. All right. So Planned Parenthood will say, we'll write you this big check because we know you're pro-choice and you're going to deliver for us. And so when that person gets into office, Planned Parenthood comes up with a bill and says, here's your bill. We want you to run this. Well, they're going to say no. They just accepted a massive campaign check from Planned Parenthood. By the way, Planned Parenthood spent $20 million. They got a $20 million gift on this stuff from the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood did, just for this area, this region. So they get all this money from the special interest groups. They hand them the bill and they say they run. So these lawmakers don't even write the bills that are being introduced down there. And I asked Hugh McKean about this, the head of the House Republicans prior to his death. I said, Hugh, when you have to negotiate an amendment down at the state capitol, who do you call? Do you call that top Democrat down there? Do you call the lawmaker that introduced the bill himself? He goes, no, I call the ACLU. Because they wrote the bill. So I'm going to negotiate amendments with the ACLU. That is the state of our government. You want to change this? You elect stateswomen. You elect people that are principled, that know the issues and care about their constituents. And until the people get fired up enough to make that change, to go back to the days of Abraham Lincoln, or I'll even say John F. Kennedy, to go back to those days, where you have principled statesmen instead of delivery boys for special interest groups, you're not going to have any change because that's who's controlling the state. I mean, when Planned Parenthood ran a bill last year to shut down and essentially squeeze out these crisis pregnancy centers, right? These little often faith-based groups that are just trying to give women alternatives to abortion, right? Have you thought about adoption? Have you thought about how to care for your child? We can provide resources, some financial support to help you care for your child. So Planned Parenthood ran this bill that put control and squished down on these crisis pregnancy centers. Why? Because they're a threat to their business operation. And when they got that through the state capitol, guess what they did? They shipped bottles of champagne to the floor of the House of Representatives in Colorado, and they opened champagne to celebrate. Not because they were protecting women's rights to choose. No. Because they were utilizing the government to shut down a threat to their business operation. That's the state of Colorado. All right, I'm up against a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have the Chancellor of Colorado Christian University on with us, talking about an op-ed he wrote about how the left's really clamping down on religion here in the state of Colorado. So you're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler on 710 KNUS. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler on 710 KNUS. I don't know if you saw this. CCU named one of America's best colleges by Wall Street Journal. They are crushing it over there. Billy's an alum of CCU, former soccer player. We have on the line with us the Chancellor of Colorado Christian University, Dr. Donald Sweeting. He wrote in the Washington Times recently, liberals want everyone to live out their identity except Christians. Chancellor Sweeting, thanks so much for being on the radio program.
Great to be with you, Jeff.
So you're trying to figure out what's happening in places like Colorado, where it seems like vitriol towards Christians seems to be increasing among liberals who view Judeo-Christian heritage as a source of oppression. Tell us about this op-ed.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's liberals. I think it's progressives, and old liberals don't go down that track. And that's where old liberals and conservatives have a lot in common. There's just a new pattern of harassment and exclusion that amounts to reverse discrimination against millions of people who live by a Judeo-Christian moral law. And it's not exclusive to Colorado, but there's a pattern that you definitely see in Colorado, and we've seen it recently. The governor's new preschool program, preschool for all, universal preschool. But if you're a Christian school and you live by Christian standards, that doesn't apply to you. We've seen it against the Denver Coffee Shop. We've seen it against the Denver Catholic Schools recently, against the Denver Rescue Mission. And then on an individual level, of course, you see the continued harassment of Jack Phillips by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission and others. So, but Jeff, again, I just say this is Colorado, and we seem to be on the front line of it. But it's not exclusive to Colorado in the United States, as we saw, recently. You've got the shooting at the Covenant School in Tennessee, and you've got the LA Dodgers Pride Night just featuring a group ridiculing the Catholic Church. It marks a tipping point in religious bigotry.
What about the argument that, in the preschool situation, for instance, if this is state money, you need to abide by the state non-discrimination rules. And one of those includes you cannot discriminate against LGBTQ community. And even in your hiring practices, you can't do that. No one's telling you can't operate your preschool. But why do you think you have a right to state funds, even in light of your own discrimination?
Well, that law has been used to go beyond just where you get state money, as the whole Lori Smith case showed. Where it's being used to shut down free speech and conscience rights. But when you're advertising religious liberty, when you're advertising preschool for all, we're going to give it to everybody. And then in light of recent Supreme Court decisions, which tip in the direction of, this includes parochial schools too. I think you got the Constitution on your side, because this really is picking on people who hold to a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Chancellor Sweeting of Colorado Christian University. What should Christian schools, churches, homeschool operations, all that, what should they expect? It seems like it's growing. And we don't want to say we're going to get to a place of persecution. Well, I've served and represented Christians overseas that have faced really severe persecution, right? That North Korea runs over Christians with bulldozers if you're caught with a Bible. That's persecution.
Yeah.
But we would say that this is harassment, and it's growing, right?
Yeah, I use my language carefully, harassment. But I will say, it's been reported that attacks on churches in the United States have tripled in the last 4 years, and that includes arson and everything else. So it is crossing a line, and I do think we're at a tipping point. Number one is, of course, for Christians, Jesus said, "Don't be surprised when people slander you and they say all kinds of things against you and harass you and all that." So we're generally not, but we have constitutional rights, citizenship rights that even the Apostle Paul he used when he was proclaiming the gospel all through the ancient world as a Roman citizen. And I think we have to stand up, speak up. Yes, it may cost us, but exert our citizen rights and stand for the First Amendment of the Constitution, which is the religious liberty cause. But beyond that, I will say, I also think two other things. I think we should pursue elect office holders who are going to be even-handed in this, and then even more, well, on the same level as that, on a personal level, we have to pursue relationships with people who totally disagree with us on this. Our motto at CCU is grace and truth, and we want to speak the truth, but speak the truth in love and try to understand and try to figure out how to make this work together in a state that we all love.
I think there's opportunity there, and I've talked with leaders from the LGBT community, and Don, you and I have met with them. We don't exist in opposition. It's not a kind of fighting mentality. We have different worldviews, but we have different worldviews with everybody. I mean, it's part of being a Christian. There's lots of different worldviews that we don't agree with, but generally we get along pretty well in a country like this that recognizes the freedoms. And I've noticed among the LGBT community, you kind of have two different camps. You have some that go, you know what, we've achieved a lot of the rights that we were looking to achieve. And we're generally pretty content and happy to move on. But others seem kind of bent on going after people like Jack Phillips. I mean, like literally the nicest guy in all of Colorado, they picked to try to go to a fight with, and lost at the U.S. Supreme Court level. So, I mean, do you think
they didn't know they were dealing with a giant in Jack? But I think there's a number of things going on. I think number one there's a radical individualism, a kind of psychologicalized individualism that can't tolerate any kind of ideas it disagrees with. So that's at work, and then we have to shut down free speech and keep ourselves safe from ideas. There are also theories like critical theory and some of the gender and sexual ideologies which basically say, we're not going to tolerate any other view. And I think, looking at American history, look, religious groups in the United States radically disagree with each other, but we found a way to live with each other, even as we articulate our differences and try to persuade each other. But that has worked. I'm not sure why this is not working, and I think we have work to do in the state of Colorado, where we need to sit down and really listen to each other and figure it out.
Talking with Dr. Donald Sweeting, the Chancellor of Colorado Christian University. By the way, in the news now over the fact that the Wall Street Journal has named it one of the top colleges in America. So right here. Also, one of the top 10 most conservative schools in America, right here in Denver, Colorado. Chancellor Sweeting, thanks so much for being on the program today.
Great to be with you, Jeff.
Friends, when we come back, Joel Rosenberg will be joining us all the way from Israel. He's one of the editor of All Israel News. We're going to be talking about this Biden prisoner swap and deal with Iran that unfreezed $6 billion to the mullahs. What that means, why the president decided to do this on September 11th, and what it's going to mean for Israel, what it's going to mean for Iran, for America, for all of those complexities. You're not going to want to miss it. Joel Rosenberg is one of the most brilliant thinkers out there and a prolific author, so he'll be covering this, as well as his interview with Vivek Ramaswamy and what he thinks about his foreign policy credentials. We've been broadcasting now for almost 3 hours. Incredible show. Lots of news to cover. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. You're listening to 710 KNUS. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. Top-rated show, talk show in Denver, according to Westward Magazine. It's a real honor to be with you all today. I saw what the Biden administration did on the deal with Iran, and I can't make sense of it. And so I thought I'd ask my friend, the esteemed Joel Rosenberg, to help me try to understand this. A New York Times best-selling author with 17 novels and 5 nonfiction books with 5 million copies in print. He's also the founder and editor-in-chief of 2 news and analyst websites, allisrael.com and allarab.news. He has a show on TBN, The Rosenberg Report. One of the most brilliant minds and insight into what's happening in the Middle East. Joel, help me figure this out. Thanks for being on the show, brother. What's up?
Great to be with you, Jeff, and shalom from Jerusalem. Wait, I just want to make sure I understand you. You're saying you don't understand why President Biden would give $6 billion to terrorists to reward them for their terrorism, to let free a few American Iranians who Iran keeps, kidnapping so that they get more money from America. You're not following the logic?
I'm not.
I'm not sure if I can help you, my friend. I mean, it's pretty obvious. You just pay off terrorists. That's the plan.
And some reporters were saying, isn't this a ransom payment? Now, you can make the argument that this was their money. It was frozen. But this was all done also on September 11th. So walk us through these details. What happened on September 11th that the Biden administration did here?
Well, they wanted to repeat, apparently, their success in Afghanistan, because 2 years ago, they let everybody, or last year, I guess it was, 2 years ago, they surrendered to the Taliban on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And they felt that would be a good signal, to the world. Look, look, it doesn't make sense, but the details specifically are, we got several hostages. I think it was 5 or 6 of them, that Iranian Americans who'd gone back to visit their families and had been, captured and imprisoned for months and months and months and months. No resolution. You can't do diplomacy with Iran. Obviously, they're trying to do a shakedown, right? But they did get something for it. The Iranians, not just money. It wasn't money for hostages. Iran got prisoners that America, was holding, Iranian prisoners that were guilty of various, offenses against the United States. So that should have been a straight trade.
Right.
It's not that often that, think back to the Cold War, Jeff, where, we would have a spy, right? There was a whole movie, Bridges of Spies, right? We have a spy, you have a spy, let's trade. It wasn't, we have a spy, you have a spy. Could you also give us $6 billion to help us because our terrorism fund is running low and we need more money to kill more Americans, Israelis, Arabs, and others. So I can't explain President Biden and his team, the decisions they make. Look, I am sympathetic to Americans being held in Iran, but I plead with Iranian Americans, do not go back to Iran. Right. It is not safe. It's not a free country. And just because you have an Iranian passport or heritage, you are not safe. And this keeps happening, and it shouldn't.
There seems to be a pattern here. The Victor Bout Brittany Griner prison exchange that took place December 8th of 2022, where we exchanged for a basketball player caught on a drug charge, like a guy that's been convicted of smuggling an arms dealer, essentially a Russian arms dealer. So what's with bad deals? Is this going to be maybe an argument for Donald Trump to come back? The art of the deal. Don't just allow these terrible deals to take place. I mean, why are these guys getting? Why is it so one-sided? It feels like every time.
Well, look, I'm not endorsing or anything, but you just raised the point of Trump versus Biden. Look, one of those two people wrote a book called Art of the Deal, and one of them campaigned from their basement and can't get through a sentence. I mean, one of them knows how to negotiate, and clearly the other doesn't. President Trump, and particularly using CIA director and former, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, got 3 Americans released out of North Korea. We did not give the North Koreans $6 billion, right? We gave them the opportunity to talk to us and for us not to go to war with them. And that, given that, remember Trump was calling Kim Jong-un the little rocket man because he kept firing longer and longer range ICBMs, hoping eventually to have one that could hit, Alaska, Seattle, Los Angeles, whatever. And Trump threatened him, and he ridiculed him, and he mocked the North Korean leader until he got the little man's attention, and then they started talks, and they got some serious things out of it, including Americans back home, but they didn't give away $6 billion. It's a travesty. I'm glad for those Americans that got released, but Biden keeps showing weakness, whether it's surrendering in Afghanistan, whether it's his inability to be articulate on the world stage, and more world leaders feeling like they can take him for a ride, right? Why did Putin invade Ukraine under the Biden administration and not under the Trump administration? Putin didn't invade anybody during the during the Trump administration, right? Russia didn't invade any country during the Trump 4 years, but during Obama, he invaded, right, Syria and Crimea and Eastern Donbass in Ukraine. During the last weeks of the George W. Bush administration, he invaded Georgia, the country of Georgia. Just to be clear, for those who are not paying close attention, they're like, "Wait, the Russians invaded Georgia? What the? Are they trying to take over Coca-Cola in Atlanta? What do they want?" No, this is the country of Georgia, and Putin still controls 20% of the country of Georgia, and then he stopped invading anybody for 4 years because he didn't know what Trump would do. He respected Trump's strength. I'm not saying Trump has done everything right, but I'm saying the world leaders, the worst leaders in the world, are smelling blood in the water. They sense weakness in Washington. They sense weakness in the White House under Biden, and Russia has moved. Right? They've invaded Ukraine. The North Koreans are firing missiles again. They didn't for most of the Trump administration. Iran is taking hostages and getting money, American taxpayer money, right? $6 billion could have helped build the wall, right? I mean, there's a lot of things you could do with $6 billion, like keep 7 million people from invading America through the Mexican border. But, and doing it on 9/11 is so disgraceful. It's rewarding terrorism on the ultimate symbolic day of terrorism hitting us and us not being prepared for it. And it's infuriating. And this is a president that needs to be retired and very, very soon.
Talking with Joel Rosenberg, the acclaimed New York Times bestselling author of 17 novels and 5 nonfiction books with over 5 million copies in print. Joel, what do you think they're going to do with this money? Now, one of the arguments is that this wasn't our money. We had just frozen their accounts. So it was Iran's money, but we weren't allowing them access to it. What's the concern out of Israel that they're going to do with this money?
Well, to be specific, Jeff, that is true that this is money that's been frozen. It's been frozen since 1979. Let's try to remember what happened in 1979. 1979 in November, the Iranian regime, took over the American embassy in Tehran, the capital of Iran, and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. So the reason we froze Iranian assets starting then, and we've done more and more freezing of their assets over time as Iran has conducted more and more terrorism against us. But the Iranians are like, okay, we'll just sell more oil illegally because they're under sanctions, and nobody's gonna really stop us. And do you realize that the United States has never militarily acted against Iran to punish them for anything they've done since 1979? Remember the failed rescue attempt by the emerging Delta Force, right, under Carter. But since then, no military action has ever been taken. So you think more than 40 years of terrorism, killing Americans in all over the world, Saudi Arabia, in Iraq, killing Israelis in Argentina, here in Israel, and so forth, funding all these terrorist organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, any terrorist organization that starts with an H, apparently is the plan there in Iran. If you want to start a terrorist organization, I don't recommend it, but just make sure you start with an H, and Iran will give you money as long as you hate Americans and Israelis, Christians and Jews. So this is just going on, and nobody, and this is a slight criticism of Trump too. I was actually in Saudi Arabia meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. I had a group of evangelical leaders that I brought with me to meet with him. First Israeli ever to meet at such a senior level with a top Saudi official. And as we were leaving the country, Iranian drones attacked Saudi Arabia's biggest oil refinery system. It was bad. And it showed how vulnerable the Saudis are, and they need air defense systems. Well, what happened? President Trump didn't do anything. Now, about many months later, seemingly disconnected from that event, he did take out Iran's top terrorist, Qasem Soleimani, in a brilliant and daring airstrike at the Baghdad airport, and not only took out Qasem Soleimani, really the mastermind of the Iranian terror network, but also several of his top deputies. That was great, but it wasn't enough to make Iran think, oh, so there's a reaction for every action. No, there seems not to be. In fact, what Biden is doing is, if you use more terrorism, we'll give you more money. Right? Think of the Iran nuclear deal that Trump pulled out of, but that President Obama and then Vice President Biden negotiated. Iran got $150 billion that time for what? Have they stopped building a nuclear weapon program? No. Have they stopped enriching uranium to military grade, status? No. Have they stopped enriching plutonium? No. Have they mothballed any of their nuclear research and development facilities? No. Have they dismantled their long-range missile defense capabilities? No. Have they stopped funding terrorism? No. So what did we get? Nothing. Less than nothing. And they got $150 billion plus so that's why Trump pulled out of that deal. And what's Biden doing? He's begging Iran, come back in. We'll give you even more money. This is why it's inexplicable, right? This feels anti-American. It's so against American values and American security and American interests. It's very difficult not to think of this as malicious. Let's say it's not malicious. So let's just say it's just foolish, bad policy, or that Biden, he's barely coherent. I have to pray for him because I'm an evangelical, and God tells me in the New Testament to pray for, my neighbors, also for my enemies. But let's say he's not even those. Let's say it's just pray for your leaders and all those in authority.
1 Timothy 2:1-4. Yeah,
exactly. But I also pray sort of like my Orthodox Jewish forebears did in Russia. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us, right? It's time. Look, I'm not sure which is worse, though. If Biden steps down, Jeff, we get Kamala Harris. So I've got a column coming out tomorrow saying, look, I'm starting to think that Michelle Obama actually jumps into this race this fall, and that it might actually be planned. Not that Biden stumbles, but that there's actually a plan to hand the keys to the kingdom, as it were, to Michelle Obama. And look at what's happening. The Democrats have moved the first of the nation voting from Iowa, where it's always been, and where it is still for Republicans. They moved it to South Carolina, much bigger African-American Democratic voting base in South Carolina than, of course, in Iowa. Where's the convention for the Democrats going to be next year?
Chicago.
Michelle Obama's hometown, right? Chicago. And she actually, in a poll that just came out last month, if she went head to head against Biden, and she's not going to do that, but if she did, she's winning by 10 points right this moment. You saw David Ignatius, columnist, a very respected columnist for the Washington Post,
right?
Respected in his world. He put out a column yesterday saying, Biden is too old, and with all respect, it's time for him to step down and not run. That's coming from the Washington Post, right? This isn't some right-wing
specifically
conspiracy.
and specifically says Kamala Harris is not fit for it either. So yeah, they're moving.
Exactly.
Talking with Joel Rosenberg.
I think it's go ahead.
Well, we're going to be up against a commercial break, but talking with Joel Rosenberg, the acclaimed author, editor of All Israel News, All Arab News. We're going to talk about his interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, an article on Israel, Iran, abortion, all of that coming up when we come back. Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler on 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain first-hand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler this beautiful Thursday morning, September 14th, 9:27. Weather looking pretty good today. Little afternoon rain showers, high 72. Friday, a little cooler. Morning rain, 65. And then Saturday and sunny and warm, 77, 83 respectively. Monday, 82. Tuesday, 80. And Wednesday, 81. We're still holding on to those 80s here in Colorado. You got to enjoy them as long as you can. We're talking with Joel Rosenberg, a New York Times bestselling author of 17 novels and 5 nonfiction books with over 5 million copies in print. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of 2 news and analysis websites, allisrael.com and allarab.news. Joel, you recently did an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy on Israel, Iran, and abortion. You had an interesting take on him. Give us a sense of your interview with him.
Yeah, it was very interesting. I'm starting to work my way through interviewing each of the major presidential candidates for my TBN TV show, the Rosenberg Report, 9 p.m. Eastern, I guess it would be 7 p.m. Mountain for you guys on TBN. And I had 50 minutes with him, which was pretty good. And it was actually the longest and most detailed long-form interview that he's done about Israel and the Middle East, which is primarily my focus since we live here in Jerusalem and we're, running all Israel news and so forth. But I also wanted to ask him as an evangelical about his position on abortion. So where do you want to start? Because it was very interesting.
Yeah, well, let's start with foreign policy, because you said he hasn't carefully thought through what he believes about foreign policy. That's kind of important as a president.
It is kind of important. And look, the guy is a genius, right? I mean, he's created multiple billion-dollar companies. He's, best-selling author of two big books. He's smart, and I like him. I want to be clear. I really like his, family immigrant success story, and those are domestic. The problem is, moving into foreign policy, he really doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing. And I've been studying him for months. I talked to him for almost an hour. So let's pick an example. Let's pick an example, which would be Iran, right? We were just talking about Iran. So he told an Israeli newspaper the week before I interviewed him that he was asked directly, would you use military force to stop the Iran nuclear threat if essentially if there were no other options available? And he said no. He said he would be an anti-war president. He's not going to stumble or sleepwalk into another war. He'll help Israel defend itself, but no, he's not going to use military force. This became a big story here, as you might expect, because no Republican has that I can think of, except maybe Rand Paul a few years ago when he ran, showed such a stunning misunderstanding of how to deal with the Iranian regime, and that sounds more like Biden or the Squad or something, or Bernie Sanders. So I pressed him on that. He said, no. I didn't say I wasn't. I didn't take the military option off the table. I said, yes, that's exactly. He goes, no, that's what the headline made you think. I said, no, Vivek, I watched. It was actually a videotaped interview that you did with the newspaper. I watched the whole thing. I'm quoting you. You were asked directly, and you said no, you wouldn't use military force, and you explained why. No. What I meant was I wouldn't put boots on the ground. I said, you mean you don't want to invade Iran like the United States invaded Iraq back in 2003? He goes, exactly, yes. Well, okay, Jeff, right? This. If you're running for president and you tell people you're not going to use military force to defend America and our allies, including Israel, from a nuclear threat in Iran, you can't come back later and say, well, no, I didn't mean I wasn't going to use any force. I just wasn't going to invade a country of 80 million people. So I pressed him on that, but he was pretty squirrely, and that was disappointing. But add to that, I said, I watched an interview or a question that a voter in New Hampshire this summer asked you, would you end the $3.8 billion a year that the United States gives to Israel in military aid so that we can have, strong missile defense systems and so forth to protect ourselves from Iran and other threats? And Ramaswamy said he would end that, and he hoped to do it by 2028. And that became a big story here. So I pressed him on that. He said, no, look, we're not going to cut off Israel like in a vacuum. I mean that I want to build Abraham Accords 2.0, more peace treaties with the Arabs. And over time, when Israel's ready and they don't need the money, that I said, okay, well, that's not actually what you said, right? I mean, what you said, no. Obviously, I'm not going to cut them off precipitously. But, and then he basically indicated that is really what he does want to do. But he got caught in saying something very unwise, but also very unpopular with the Republican base, certainly with evangelical Christians and conservatives generally. America's wasting a lot of money on a lot of things, but we're not wasting money on Israel. Israel provides enormous value in making sure that we don't have to go to war to protect. Nobody in Israel is asking America to go to war for us. If we have to go to war against Iran, we'll do it. We've taken out nuclear reactors. I interviewed a few months ago a former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, who is the only living prime minister of Israel, obviously not in office now, but who actually took out a foreign hostile nuclear reactor, Syria, 2007. Fascinating story. And before that, Menachem Begin took out the Iraqi nuclear reactor in 1981 or 82, terribly attacked and criticized, lambasted, even by President Reagan at the time. But Dick Cheney said when we went to war with Iraq in 2003, thank God that the Israelis took out that facility. Why? Because we learned how close they were to building a whole new nuclear program. I'm not saying it justified that invasion. That's a whole other conversation for later. But clearly, Iran is not a threat to anybody at the moment. And thank God for that. So these are problems. And then I press them on Taiwan, the show that will actually air tonight on the Rosenberg Report, but I'll give you a little sneak preview. I said, you said that you would defend, Vivek Ramaswamy, you said that you would defend Taiwan, one of our most important allies in the Pacific, from a communist invasion, but only until 2028. And then all bets were off. And he got a squirrely on that one too. But I said, no, but that's what you said. Why do you? He goes, well, because right now Taiwan produces about 90% of the most advanced semiconductor microchips that we use in our most high-tech, military equipment and smartphones and computers and whatever. He goes, we need to move. In my presidency, Vivek told me he would encourage companies to move their operations from Taiwan to the United States. And then once we had what he called semiconductor independence, then we might not help Taiwan after that. I said, Vivek, I appreciate that you want to defend them strongly and clearly in your first 4 years, but do you realize that you're sending a message to every other ally of America in the world that there may be a day where we cut you loose? You already are talking about cutting Israel loose. Now you're talking about cutting Taiwan loose. You've already vowed to cut Ukraine loose the first day you get in office. No more U.S. aid, no more U.S. weapons. I said, look, I get that you don't want to have Americans fight in Ukraine, but you're having the exact wrong opposite logic. If we don't help Ukraine stop Putin now in Ukraine, he's going to invade eventually Poland and the Baltics. He said that. His advisors have said that. So if we don't help Ukraine stop the Russians today, we're going to have a war with all NATO and the Russians, World War III, that could go nuclear, in the not too distant future. It's a good investment to stop Putin now. He keeps invading one country after another, as we discussed in the last segment. So, look, I like Vivek on a lot of his domestic policies, but I think he just doesn't understand what he's doing. He's a genius in business, Jeff, but I don't think he has any business being the commander in chief until he does his homework. Is he?
It kind of gets the sense he's like the Pete Buttigieg of this cycle. Very articulate, very smart, very young, youthful. But then when the rubber hits the road, you go, you're just the kind of mayor of a town of Indiana, at least in Pete's role. And so that.
Well, I mean, maybe. But I don't know that's a fair analogy because, being a mayor of a small town in Indiana is not quite the same as creating multi-billion-dollar companies
Right.
and exposing the woke corporate culture. I mean, he really has been a pioneer on some of these things. But I think the key is this, and this you'll understand this, Jeff, because you're a true conservative. I think Vivek Ramaswamy, for all his strengths, is not actually a classic true conservative. For all of his adult life, he's described himself as a libertarian. One of the few times he ever voted for president, he voted for a libertarian candidate in 2004. Now, why is that important? Well, do libertarian candidates win the presidency? No. Why don't they win the presidency? Because they usually don't know what they're talking about. In some areas, sure. 12% flat tax. I'm a Steve Forbes guy. I love the flat tax. So sure. But libertarians tend to be very isolationist. They're totally focused about expanding freedom here at home, but they don't understand the threats to our freedoms from abroad. And that's why people like Rand Paul, for all of his strengths in certain areas, right, exposing the lunacy on, vaccines and, the COVID frauds and all those things, right? But Rand Paul doesn't quite understand Israel. He doesn't understand foreign policy. I wouldn't want to see him as commander in chief, because he seems to think that freedom here at home is all that you have to think about. And, this is why Vivek Ramaswamy is getting beat up by the more classic conservatives in the race, right? We saw Nikki Haley beat Vivek Ramaswamy, saying, look, you have no foreign policy, and it shows. Mike Pence beat him up pretty badly. I showed the Nikki Haley quote clip last week on the Rosenberg report. And tonight I'll show the Mike Pence, not because I'm endorsing those two either. I'm just saying I want people who are intrigued with Vivek Ramaswamy, and they should be. He's fascinating, and he's gone from zero name recognition and zero in the polls to he's running maybe third or second even in some polls in Iowa. And if he were to break through there, right, this is a candidate, a rival to Trump, given how far Trump is ahead, has to break through in Iowa, or there's literally no hope. If Trump wins Iowa, he's the nominee. Barring some unforeseen health problem or whatever. And I'm not saying if that is a good or bad thing. I'm just saying if you're Vivek Ramaswamy and you've gone from 0 to 7 in one poll in Iowa, 9 in another recent poll in Iowa, that's pretty good, given that no one had ever heard of you 8 months ago. But as evangelicals and conservatives in Iowa look at him more carefully, they're going to start seeing some things that they don't like. And I was honest with him on the show, respectful. I'm not trying to be a CNN, anchor, or, I don't meet the press, or I give him his space to say what he wants, but I also called him out and pressed him on some of these things. Abortion is another issue. He calls himself pro-life, but he 100% opposes any federal legislation to ban abortion. For example, I asked him specifically about Senator Lindsey Graham's bill to ban abortions at 15 weeks, right? That's when we're totally sure, 100% sure that an unborn baby feels pain. Now, I'm pro-life from the moment of conception, but 70% of Republicans support a 15-week ban federally, and 51% of all Americans support that 15% ban. And evangelicals definitely support that as like a minimum, right? Vivek does not. Now, that he was honest about and he was clear about, and he hasn't changed his position. So I give him credit for being, he's much more consistent with domestic policy positions. But as evangelicals take a closer look this fall, and conservatives even who are not evangelicals, conservative Catholics and people of no faith and other faiths, I think they're going to be very troubled by some things that he's saying, things that are very important to us. And so just being articulate and being a great business guy and being an outsider will be good, but when there are other options in the race, people who get these things and have experience in foreign policy as well as domestic policy, then I think he's going to hit some whitewater rapids, to use more Colorado imagery, right?
Joel Rosenberg, a New York Times bestselling author of 17 novels, 5 nonfiction books, and 5 million copies in print. If you want to know what's going on in Israel, allisrael.com, great news program. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of that, as well as allarab.news. You can find out more about him by going to joelrosenberg.com, joelrosenberg.com. Joel, thanks so much for your time, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff. God bless you.
God bless you too. Friends, Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. We've got one segment left. You're not going to want to miss it. You're listening to 710 KNUS. Jeff Hunt filling in for the great George Brauchler, the international man of mystery out there doing something to save the world. Hey, if you had any comments on that interview with Joel Rosenberg with regards to Israel or Vivek Ramaswamy, go ahead and text it in on the 710 KNUS app. I'd love to hear where you are on that. There's a side of Vivek that appeals to me in the sense of, and look, I was a big advocate. I wrote this in my student newspaper that the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan fit under the just war theory, that it was necessary. We had just been attacked after 9/11, and the idea of letting evil just kind of fester out there eventually ended up on our doorstep. And I got it. I believed in it. Now, 20 plus years later, the trillions of dollars that have been spent, and, you know, part of the argument was we're going to bring democracy to these countries, right? And that was kind of, if we just gave them a chance, that these cultures are going to open up to democracy and they'll love it. And, you know, little girls being educated and all that. I got that. I was a true believer. And now years later, I kind of go, especially with the fall of Afghanistan, where like the next day they kick girls out of school and you're like, seriously? Trillions of dollars and a lot of blood spent there. And like the next day, it just went back. And Yoram Hazony gets into this with his book, that the nature of the culture really, really matters when it comes into this. And I think Vivek's kind of tapping into that all of this effort to go out there and to spread democracy and to engage in these internal conflicts and without any consideration as to whether or not the culture will actually embrace it, that's an honest critique. That's a valid critique. And I think that's why some people are looking at both the Trump and the Vivek models as results in foreign policy engagement. It's somewhat valid. And the kind of Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, old school viewpoint has some challenges, has some problems with it. So I think there's a reason why he's doing third in the polls. Is partially because of that, but there's some challenges. I don't think you can abandon Israel at all. They're absolutely critical, and they deserve our funding. From my perspective, we were there in April. Wonderful country, beautiful country, wonderful people. In many ways, they're doing it right in the Middle East, and that should be replicated and supported. You have religious freedom. You have Muslims, Jews, Christians, all together living relatively peaceful together in the city of Jerusalem, in the country of Israel. That's a model worth replicating. That's good. The Abraham Accords have been successful. So there's a pathway there that should be embraced and supported. And I think Vivek's a little wrong there, but that's what the primaries are for. The debate's coming. By the way, you probably saw Mitt Romney retiring from the U.S. Senate. Now, I'm probably the only person in the country. I'm going to hold to this, Billy. I think I am the only person in the country that worked for Mitt Romney and spoke at a Bikers for Trump rally. There's not a lot of people that can claim that mantle. In fact, I remember my colleagues on the Romney campaign organizing an effort to speak against Trump. Even after he got the nomination, I wasn't going to sign on to that. I was a fan of Mitt Romney. I'm a fan of Donald Trump. I'm basically a fan of anybody that's trying to stop the radical left. And when you go through the primary process, it's time to get behind the guy or the gal, whoever it is. To stop the radical left and what they're doing to this country. So I wished Mitt Romney the very best. I thought he did okay. There were moments I really liked about him. The first debate in 2012 here in Denver, where he really went after Obama. So when you could get that fight in Mitt Romney, there are elements of it. I really like that. We had that big rally up at Red Rocks. I don't know if anybody went to that. We had to turn away like 4,000 people when he completely packed Red Rocks. We thought we had all this momentum. We thought we were going to win. I was his coalitions director here in the state of Colorado, and got to know his family, got to meet them. Wonderful people. He's a great husband and father. He got that right. I disagreed with him on some policy issues, especially in the Senate. But listen, wish him the very best. And he's moving on. And you know, there is kind of a point. He pointed out in his video, he's going to be in his 80s. And, it would be nice if other people in Congress and Senate got that message too. I worked up there in the U.S. Senate. I worked for Rick Santorum in the U.S. Senate. And there were people that made that their lives. Being an elected official was everything to them. And they would lose, and within a few months after losing, die. Like, it was seriously like everything to them. That's not the way it should be. You're there to serve people first and foremost. And once you reach an age where your service is not effective, I don't care if you're Mitch McConnell or Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden. I don't care what party you are. Constituents come first. And if your constituents are not first, if it's your own career, your own pride, your own sense of purpose, I'm sorry, time to leave, time to move on. I thought that was admirable of Senator Romney, Governor Romney, to do that. But probably saw that he's moving on, and it's a different Republican Party. It's a different time. I don't think he'd win a nomination right now. I think things have changed, and there's bigger issues to face. And we talked a little bit about it earlier on the show. I'm going to be writing an op-ed on this. I think that this election in 2024 is going to come down to, is going to be the Oliver Anthony election, the rich men north of Richmond, all the other issues, foreign policy, Second Amendment, pro-life, border security. I think people feel that the system is rigged against them. I think the people feel, I know so many people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make it happen. If the system is rigged, then it's going to come down to who can correct the system, get us back to our founding principles that made America great. And if it's taking on elements of the federal government, obviously in a peaceful way, then that's going to be the issue that drives this. So it's a different election this year. We're right up against the break. I wanted to make sure you guys saw this because you're not alone. If you're feeling that the system is really falling apart, New York Times, Washington Post. Poverty increased sharply last year in the United States, particularly among children, as living costs rose and federal programs that provided aid to families during the pandemic were allowed to expire. It's kind of a both and situation. It's inflation, but also the earned income tax credit, the expanded child tax credit. The poverty rate rose to 12.4% in 2022, up from 7.8% in 2021, the largest one-year jump on record, the Census Bureau said. Poverty among children more than doubled to 12.4% from a record low of 5.2% the year before. Friends, it's not easy. It is not easy right now. And for those of you out there, we are fighting for our children and grandchildren against a woke left that's coming after us in every way, from your lawnmower and what you can use to what's in your pocketbook. So the great peaceful resistance for free ideas, freedom, responsibility starts here at 710 KNUS. Jeff Hunt filling in for George Brauchler. It's been an honor to be with you. God bless you, and yeehaw.